Yeah, so we're going to be talking about difficulty in... Hello, Nordy. It's not your turn. We're going to be talking about difficulty in terms of puzzles. So difficulty creep is sort of a all-encompassing, okay, volume and feedback is good. All-encompassing topic that covers the general perception that difficulty of puzzles is increasing over time. But anyways, we will get into all sorts of definitions and stuff, I think, in the next segment with Pallando. I hope I'm saying that name correctly. Welcome. How are you doing today?
'Twas brillig and the slithy toaths to gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogroves and the momoraths outgrabe.
Okay.
Beware the jabberwock, my son.
I also... So I know you have a lot of thoughts on this. We've already I know you have lots of thoughts on this, so let me just ask you, basically, what's your perception on difficulty creep? Does it exist, and what is it?
I think I'm going to mainly talk about the second part, because I think there's going to be a lot of other people who know far more about Sudoku and have been solving them and creating them for far longer than I have. But there's a couple of things in my background which may help us come up with a workable definition of some of the terms involved. So at least when different people later in the discussion talk about it, they're talking about the same thing.
Right.
So, difficulty. Difficulty is a difficult thing to define.
Yeah.
You've got a couple of allied concepts. You've got complexity, which mathematicians have come up with a really beautiful definition of Gregory Chatin and Komologrov. I think I pronounced that wrong.
It's okay.
But that's not quite the same. A complex puzzle is not necessarily the same as a difficult one. So
Right.
I'd like to break down the possibilities of what we might be referring to when we talk about the difficulty of a puzzle, and get your feedback on what you think is closest to how you're using the word difficulty when you're talking about difficulty creep.
Right. And when you say complex, do you mean, say, the rule set, or do you mean the deductions are complex, or both?
Well,
to get our definition straight.
Yeah. If you're talking about the complexity of a proposition, then if you're just looking at the words in the statement and saying, well, how complex a proposition is that? You could try saying, well, A and B is a simpler proposition to A and B or C and or B or C. But when you start talking about English, you've got words, and those words may themselves contain lots of subcomplex. So you actually have to look at a combination. The words in a sentence plus whatever words are needed to define those words, and it's the complete thing which gives you the actual true measure of the complexity. And we'll come back to that later.
It's almost just a simple example. If you say normal Sudoku rules apply, there's hidden context in just that statement. Sudoku rules needs to be defined, right? So there's layers of complexity, I would say.
Yeah. So when you're talking about difficulty, you get someone who sits in front of a Sudoku puzzle, they spend 2 hours solving it. At the end, they say, wow, that was difficult. But, when you break down what they mean, it's their particular solve of that particular puzzle at that time that they found difficult, and someone else might show them a technique they hadn't considered, and they might solve the same puzzle again in only 10 minutes. Now, the puzzle itself didn't change, but their experience of the puzzle changed.
Yeah, it's easy once you know what to do.
So that type of difficulty, the difficulty of an individual solver performing a particular route through the puzzle is not an absolute, it's relative to the solver and the sort of the toolbox of solution techniques they're comfortable with.
Right.
So that's one thing which difficulty might refer to. Then you've got how amenable it is for a solver to have an easy path through it. So,
Right.
if there are lots of paths, it's very overclued,
Hmm.
and whether there are some difficult paths or not, there's several easy ones which are well signposted, and the solver can find it. Then that is a puzzle which is amenable to their finding an easy route through. There might be another puzzle which has an equally easy route, but it's hard to spot.
Right.
And in part, that's to do with, not empathy, but how well the solver anticipates the style of the setter.
Or
And,
the other way around as well. If the setter can anticipate how the solver will look at the thing, we call it like mind reading sometimes, people say.
Yeah, like the Santa presents.
Exactly.
If you've observed one person doing several solves, you might, they're really good at colouring. I'll create a puzzle which has the sort of colouring which they like doing.
Yeah.
But more often it's a solver has solved several puzzles by a particular setter, and they've learned the style. They know what to look for.
Right. Yeah,
and again, that's not strictly a property of the puzzle itself or of the solver, but the relationship between the two.
Right.
And then the third thing that difficulty could be used to refer to is the difficulty of a particular technique, even once you're familiar with the solve, and the shortest path through a particular puzzle and the chances of finding that shortest path. What is the average experience for a baseline population who've all got the same toolkit, say people who've just watched their first CTC video and been spending, doing the time Sudoku, but haven't done any killers or anything else. They've watched CTC video, they come to Discord, they've gone to the archive, and they pulled out that puzzle.
And they cry.
What is their likely difficulty to do it, and how does that change from the older puzzles in the archive to the more recent ones? So that's three things difficulty might refer to. What's your thoughts? When you were writing the title Difficulty Creep, which of those meanings were you mentally is closest to what you were thinking of?
I think I was thinking of the last one. So how difficult a puzzle is for a group of people who have the same skill set. So, and I think the creep, the variable of that difficulty, I think it varies in how much more difficult it is for like a first time solver versus an experienced solver to solve that thing. But I think both of those things increase with the same variable connection. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And we've got a couple of things which aren't properties of the puzzle or the solver or relationship, but of the community.
Yes.
We've got, I'm not going to use technical term, but we've got what you might call a long tail distribution. The variance from the sort of top difficulty of the top 5% of puzzles to the bottom 5% has grown wider.
Right.
And if you're catering to the community who actually access the Discord archive, there is also a greater spread in there. And you've got a sort of long tail where at one end, at the lower end, you say, well, that's already been catered to by the things already in the archive, and we're sort of filling in the gaps as the top limit goes wider. So that's the third thing. A fourth thing which you could be referring to, which is the things which are relevant to the community and the tacit knowledge. I mentioned earlier I had a bit of background which might be useful to bring to this. I studied teaching and was a teacher the mathematics in schools. And one of the things they talk about is something called chunking. Now, I don't know if you've come across that word referring to a concept before.
I think I have. My partner is also a grade school teacher, so I think I have heard of that. But explain for the audience, please, and for me.
It's the way you break up concepts and bundle them together.
Okay.
Because you can measure someone's working memory by asking them to remember a string of digits,
Right.
and it'll vary somewhere between 5 digits and 9 digits, with most somewhere around 7 digits long. And that's the number of things you can hold in your mind at once.
Yeah.
If you can have each one of those things refer to something which itself is quite complex and which
Right.
you can combine with other things,
That's
that
chunking.
increases the complexity of the reasoning you're capable of doing with the things you can keep in your mind at one moment.
It's like
And
how
you'll see,
chemistry students to memorize organic chemistry. There's these big complex organic chemistry equations, and they assign like numbering systems to groups of molecules so that they can reduce the complexity for them, but the complexity of the problem is the same, and it's large.
they've studied this with chess grandmasters.
Right.
If you randomly generate a position on a chessboard just by doing random numbers and deciding what piece to put there, chess grandmasters are really not much better than your average non-chess player at remembering the position.
Right.
But the actual results of a game, they're a lot better. And that's because they can memorize whole moves and fractions of a position by referring to something they're already familiar with.
Right.
And in Sudoku, you've got the same thing. You're building up a language of pairs and relationships with pairs, even if you've not put a formal name on it, like an X-wing or a finned Y-wing or whatever. By repeated exposure, you're improving the ability at scanning and spotting these things, and it doesn't feel like you're doing something more difficult because you're judging against a subjective experience. But what
Right.
you've done is you've actually been constructing chunks over the series of puzzles you've done, and that is actually altering what the difficulty is of a particular puzzle.
Yeah. I think fundamentally you can describe what you're talking about as the familiarity with logic or certain puzzle variants really impacts someone's perception of their difficulty.
You can't see, but I'm nodding here.
Okay. Yes.
I'm just scanning chat to see if there are any comments I should be answering.
There's quite a few useful comments, but they're mostly agreeing with what we're saying.
So there's one analogy you can do for people who are familiar with electronic components and resistors. You've got the idea of resistors in parallel and resistors in series, and you can draw an analogy between that and solve paths.
Okay.
You can have a high resistance solve path, i.e. one which is difficult to do,
So
another one a low
every step is
resistance
in
one.
series, right?
Yeah, and you've got another one which is low resistance because it's easy to do. And the more of those you add in parallel, the easier that step is going to be. Whereas if you add several of those in series, you're increasing, if not the average difficulty per time, then at least the complexity, the total length to do it. And I said I'd come back to complexity here. And someone came up with a measure of the power of different clocks clue placements by how much it narrowed down the number of possible combinations left once you've placed that clue on the board.
Interesting.
And I think it's a log 8, log 9 or something, and you get a certain amount, and you can compare the power of different clues. And you could look at progressing from not having used a clue to having used a clue, and how much that progresses you along a path as a measure. And a complex one would be one which is doing the whole thing from the grid totally unsolved to the grid solved in lots of stages in series.
Right.
Whereas a less complex one would be one which you have fewer steps which resolve more.
Right. And I think often the form of a puzzle is several section. If you're thinking about this analogy of resistors, it's often several sections of parallel paths that all like sort of lead to one single deduction that can get you through to the next set of parallel paths. There's usually one sort of linking deduction between large sets of, oh, you could do this or do that, but you'll end up getting to this step. And if that step is easy, then the puzzle is fairly easy. If that step is very, very hard, the puzzle is regarded as very, very hard.
Yeah, Riff Clown just mentioned something on chat, which is subjectivity, because how much you can hold the path in your head. And yeah, and for example, when you watch Simon going through combinations and then only pencil marking a bit, which for someone else, you'd have to be exhaustingly pencil marked a whole row or column and then go through that.
Yeah.
And whether the logic is the same or he's internally found a different way to chunk it, that because you often see him go silent and say, okay, I'm going to just think about it, and then he comes out and now I'm going to explain it. And it's quite possible the explanation he does is not how he internally thinks about it, and he might not even be able to put into words
exactly
the actual internal representation while he's carrying it out, because they're nameless chunks, but they are chunks nonetheless, and a valid way. And it ties in with people using intuition and then coming back and verifying that their intuition is actually correct. I think if I've timed this correctly, it is now precisely 8 o'clock and it's time for my segment to end. So
I did promise you 25 minutes, so you have another 6 minutes if you want.
No, that's good. I hope I provided some food for thought, or at least a basis on which to use a common language for the rest of the discussion. I shall be watching it with interest.
Well, actually, I do have one question before you go.
Sure.
We've done a lot to define what's difficult, what's hard, and how we define a difficulty scale. But I think a weird question about difficulty creep and difficulty in general is, what is easy? Like, what is the lowest easy?
Can you bring up that Sudoku puzzle I sent you a link to?
Yes, absolutely.
So, a pop quiz for the people on the chat channel. Just type a number from 1 to 5, your first reaction looking at the puzzle, how difficult a puzzle you think this one is.
I believe this is a classic Sudoku. The circles
yes,
are
is.
just for the answer check.
Yeah, the circles are just additional hints given. That is a classic Sudoku.
The answer is 1 or 2 in the chat, it looks like. And in Totally Normal Cat says 5.
Now, you see, this is the first Sudoku puzzle that was ever published. So this is the one which Howard Garnes created, and that's what started Sudoku. And so a person solving this for the first time had no experience of Sudoku, even the concept of Sudoku, they had to work out for themselves the idea of a naked single and a hidden single. So you've got all that additional hidden complexity which you have to consider had to be added to the solve path. Is not just applying the techniques, it's coming up with the techniques in addition to that for that particular one. So when people sat down and solved it, compared to the other puzzles in that book, they might well have rated that as a 3 or a 4.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, if you've never seen Sudoku logic before, just using it would be very alien. All right, I think that was a great discussion. Thank you so much, Pallando, for coming on and discussing, and I hope you can make it back for the group discussion later on.
Not at all.
No. Okay. Well, I'm so glad that we had you on for this little bit, but yeah, there he goes. And next up we have Nell. And I think you were wanting to talk about the causes of difficulty tree.
Yeah, I think there's a few different sort of interconnected causes for difficulty creep. One as people get more familiar with variant rule sets and discover more cool properties of specific rule sets and the way they interact with each other, a lot of setters will start incorporating those tricks into their solve paths, leading to puzzles requiring a lot of meta knowledge. Like, of course, puzzles with relatively newer variant rule sets tend to be easier because people are still experimenting and haven't yet found all those fiendishly clever tricks you can pull with them yet. But of course, as more and more new rule sets get devised, it becomes harder to come up with new variants that are intuitive and don't require like 50 paragraph explanations plus like a 6x6 sample puzzle to give the solver any hint about what the clues mean.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah, and one elephant in the room is, of course, a lot of people first got into variant Sudokus via DTC, and they tend to showcase these fiendishly clever puzzles that rely on these insane deductions and finding new geometry properties and such. And I mean, a lot of us are craving the senpai noticed me rush of getting featured on
Yeah.
CTC and having Simon or Mark gush about your brilliance in the comment section memeing about you, and that has that can create this meta with where having fewer clues are more impressive and such. Now, there's a flip side to that in particular, because having fewer clues can also make a puzzle easier, because it's easier to direct the solver's attention to where they're supposed to look. But when
in
you're,
some ways,
you know,
there's a minimum and a maximum, sort of.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you're striving to require impressive deductions, plus with these, as others have touched on, F puzzles and ranks automated solvers, and the desire to avoid allowing bypassing of clever logic. Well, now the advent of other content creators like you, for instance, and Zeta and Ranks and Niverio and JoJo81 and a few others, that's changed the meta a little, since the difficulty of the puzzles featured there is more varied, and a lot of us are more willing to call BS when we see a puzzle that requires some absurd set scanning trick. Of course, most of us also allow backseating, which can definitely make intimidating puzzles more approachable in the moment. And
Right.
even then, there can be this impression that if it's not clearly marked as a gas puzzle, making it too easy might be a waste of the solver's talents or something.
Right, yeah.
And
or trying to hide information from the solver rather than trying to give it to them.
And you can, of course, just not choose to make a puzzle targeted at the streamer set, but that brings us to the issue of discoverability, which is a bit of a it feels like a bit of a tangent, but I do think it's it's related somewhat, because
I agree, yeah.
even if you're what?
I agree with that.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
like people want to, it's the same principle as he's
Uh-huh.
saying people want to be featured. People want to be
Oh yeah.
discovered, and difficult puzzles get attention on something like Logic Masters Germany. So it
Oh
makes
yeah.
sense that people who want to be discovered will make very, very difficult puzzles.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, and even if you're good at solving puzzles, finding fun puzzles to solve is always trickier. It's tough for the
Mhm.
solvers too, because like the testing channel in CTC's Discord server gets like 50 odd Sudokus every day,
Or hour,
which is both
depending on the day.
overwhelming and also carries the risk that you'll bang your head against a wall for hours only to find out at the end that the setter made a mistake and the puzzle's not even solvable. I have very much been both the tester and the setter in that scenario, believe me. The puzzle archive in the Discord server, that only has tested puzzles, but it's also searching. The search features on Discord are not exactly robust.
No.
LMD has much better search features, but it comes at the expense of everything else about their interface. And
Mhm.
also when you're uploading a puzzle to LMD, you have to click through this long list of tags and then type in more tags. And that sort of can build the impression that, like, okay, this is not a website for newcomers. It's a puzzle for people who live in. It's a website for people who live and breathe this stuff.
Mhm.
Take your gas puzzles elsewhere, plebeian.
Absolutely. And the ratings on
Yeah.
the ratings on the easier puzzles do not help that image at all.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Zetamath has said in the chat, I'm surprised no one has yet to say or implied that difficulty creep is bad. So I'll ask you, Nell, do you think difficulty creep is bad?
I mean, I think it's a mixed bag. It can serve to drive prospective newcomers away from the hobby, certainly.
Right.
I do think there's definitely a place for puzzles that show off like these like absurd new logical deductions and rule sets. Like my mind was blown by Potato Head's theorem as well, but I I do think it can risk driving people away from the hobby, and I think one thing that's really helped is CTC making the gas segment a regular feature.
Yeah.
Um, some others creators have done that too. Well, but of course, it's easier for them to do that because they have 14 uploads a week minimum, and usually more. And the rest of us, not so much. So it's
Right.
harder to work a regular feature like that into the schedule while also having time for anything else.
That's true. Um, yeah, they do
Yeah.
YouTube for a living, but some people have other things they have to do, right? Yeah, I agree with Zetamath that the way that gas puzzles are presented on CTC doesn't really welcome newcomers in terms of like just having Mark solve them incredibly fast, saying that they're so easy, and then and having a very long video where it's a bunch of different puzzles together, so it doesn't even look like it's a short, easy puzzle. Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of things that I don't agree with that, but I do really appreciate the gas puzzles existing and that they're featuring them.
I do it. The gas puzzles that get featured, it's still like a closed circle of setters, right? They haven't started taking submissions.
No,
Have
it's
they?
a closed circle
Right.
with Sam,
I
Clover, and Philip Newman. I don't know why.
I was yeah, I was sort of I was picturing sort of like setting up a dedicated like gas prompt or channel or feature or something like that in some puzzle plaza or in some server or something, maybe Puzzle Plaza, maybe somewhere else. I was thinking of like that might help encourage like people who feel like they have quote, have to, unquote, set absurdly difficult puzzles to help feel more comfortable, like, do that. Skunk Works. That sounds familiar. Someone in chat mentioned Skunk Works. I've heard that name before. I can't remember what it is exactly.
It's a group of setters who set puzzles in a server. They're supposed to be like the developers of new concepts and stuff. They have like channels for like developing certain variants that are new, like entropic lines came out of Skunk Works and stuff like that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Tyrgannus. I very much get why. I get there's good reasons why they don't have open submissions. I just, yeah, I understand it. I understand it. It's just yeah, I wish there were more venues for that sort of thing. Is the thing. Let me grab some water real quick.
But I was saying to Pallando that, oh, he was saying that if setters compared what they set 2 years ago to now, then it would be harder now. But then I was like, wait, a lot of setters haven't actually been setting for even 2 years, like most of them actually. So you can kind of think of a almost setter nature versus nurture sort of thing, and the nurturing that they've got has been CTC essentially. That's the father of our setter generation.
Yeah, that can be. Yeah, that can. Yeah.
And I think that's why there is a huge difficulty creep, is because basically our puzzle fathers have raised us to set difficult puzzles, essentially, is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, as Clover beautifully said in her setter video, it's super easy as a new setter too, without realizing it set puzzles exactly for the audience of Simon Anthony. Yeah, yeah, that is easy.
So should we be setting puzzles for the puzzle community, or should we be setting puzzles at a level that could be accessible to the wider community? Like easy puzzles specifically. Should we be setting puzzles so easy that they're accessible to people who have never really done variant Sudoku?
I mean, it's not an either or choice. I think there's room for both kinds of puzzles. I wish it were easier to find them and know which ones to recommend to people outside of the community.
So should we even should we push difficulty creep so that there's more range of difficulty? We just have to admit as a community that there is more range. So then we push the scale upwards so that we can fit the puzzles that are easy for the community and easy for the wider audience into two different sort of categories, 1 and 2 maybe.
Yeah, that's part of it. And of course, I mean, one issue is there is already quite a bit of range. It's just hard to find the puzzles in the lower end of that range, and
Right.
harder to get them showcased in various places. Zeta says, if you read YouTube comments, plenty of my 5-star puzzles get solved by people who have very little solving experience.
Well, that's encouraging, at least.
Yeah, that's encouraging.
At least Zeta's doing something right.
Of course, if they of course, someone with little solving experience is more likely to rate a puzzle 5-star, even if someone with a lot of solving experience would rate it like 2 or 3. But yeah, that's. Oh, Malrog suggests a move away from difficulty rating towards intended audience tags. That would be cool, but of course, it's much harder to quantify.
Yeah.
Of course, difficulty rating is also very hard to quantify, but
Yeah, I'm not sure. And also the whole drive to get noticed thing that we were talking about earlier could impact on that a lot, in terms of like why would you want to limit your audience? Why not just say it's for everyone, right?
But of course, the trouble is, no puzzle is really going to be for everyone. No puzzle can be for everyone, is the thing.
Right. Because
Because
everything
different
from
solvers are looking for different things. That's why questions about a pushback on difficulty creep are so tricky, because like I said, I think there's plenty of room for all difficulty levels. It's just yeah.
it's just trying to properly
Mhm.
get the things into the right hands that need to be there,
Yeah.
right?
That's the issue.
So maybe some kind of public gas is just what the community needs. Niverio says there's a small group of people who think that the harder puzzles are the better puzzles.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's partly due to, again, CTC's influence, but also partly just because, a lot of people outside of CTC just really do enjoy solving the most fiendishly difficult puzzles.
Right,
And of course, as Tallcat points out, there's many different reasons why a puzzle could be considered difficult.
I was talking about that before, talk at how the most difficult step can sort of be like a series resistor in a set of parallel resistors. We were talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the question I was going to ask before, so I'm going to ask it now before I forget it. So you were talking about seeing different streamers solving things and stuff like that. And I'm wondering if you have a perspective on how different does the difficulty of a puzzle appear to be when it's being solved by someone else rather than solved by yourself? Is it easy? Is it harder? Does it seem like you couldn't do that?
I think it tends to look a little easier when solved by someone else, but not very, mainly because half the time when I see someone else solve something, I think, oh God, it would have taken me twice as long to spot that. Or like if it's a brutally difficult puzzle anyway.
Right.
Um,
Is it like that watching Mark solve gas, or is it different?
it's a little. It doesn't take me that much longer
Yeah.
than Mark to solve most gas puzzles, but I don't think I've ever beaten his time. um, but I'm usually within like a couple minutes of it. It's a good question. I hadn't really thought about it in those terms, though.
And I wonder if that impacts sort of the perception of difficulty in general in the community. Like, do viewers of CTC who simply just watch instead of solve, do they think that the average puzzle is a lot easier because when watching it, it seems easier?
I mean, judging from the average comment section memeing about how the median Simon puzzle is, I recall one comment under one of Simon's videos saying, Mark's puzzle, a nice puzzle with some fun new logic. Simon's puzzle, a monster, a nightmare summoned from the ninth circle of hell by Lucifer himself, where you have to sell your firstborn child to place a single digit. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much CTC affects the perceived easiness of puzzles. I do wonder how much they affect. Well, the thing is, there's perceived easiness in terms of how easy I would find it, and there's perceived easiness in terms of how easy I think someone else would find it.
Right.
So I do think it might give the impression that that the median solver finds something easier than they do, not necessarily affecting how easy I think I would find it. I guess this is linked to imposter syndrome in a way.
Oh, for sure. Difficulty and imposter syndrome are like they are linked for sure because
No, yes, definitely.
you feel like if you rate something different than what the rating is, you feel like you're wrong.
It's an easy impression to get.
So there is this whole imposter syndrome involved with difficulty. And if something seems easier than what it's set at in an LMD, it's the same reaction, right?
Now, there's ways to push back against that feeling, of course, just by saying, like, oh, that's just okay. That's a little too targeted towards people who have like been. Oh, Math Pesto points out they're reminded of their 11-year-old math students who want to brag about problems being easy because struggle is considered bad.
Hmm.
Oh boy, yeah, that's a factor. That can be a factor. And of course, tall cat, tall cat. That's a healthy attitude, tall cat. Like when something's a 3x5 and it takes you 90 minutes. It's sometimes healthier to scoff than to assume than to kick yourself, and then yeah, rate it according to your solve. That's yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I finished I still can't say the name, but it's the jovial killer puzzle that starts with an O, and it's a regular, and I finished it, and I was like, I don't know what to rate this because it says 3 stars, but it was so unbelievably hard. I'm gonna message Jovial because I don't understand. I must have missed like so much because I just didn't get it, and she told me that there's some kind of like irregular law of leftovers extra region sort of thing that I must have missed. And it's very easy to miss those kinds of things, I think. At least I find it very easy to miss those kind of things. Oblique, yes. But for sure you can
I
find
remember that one.
that a puzzle seems much harder than it actually is. I remember Pancake solved that puzzle in like 11 minutes in the voice chat. And I spent like 2 hours on it and I didn't know what I was doing wrong.
Yeah, and
Before the
Tyrgannus points out it's nice to rate puzzles before they have enough ratings that you can see the difficulty, so there's less bias. That's one reason it's good to. That's one of many reasons it's nice to look at puzzles with fewer solves on there, as well as just drawing attention to new puzzles that aren't already in the top, that aren't already on the highest rated in terms of quality or highest rated in terms of difficulty page, the first page of those results on LMD when you sort by quality or difficulty. Which, back to discoverability again.
Yeah, that's discoverability. Full circle, and that's actually full circle just in time for 25 minutes. So we'll have to move on, but thank you so much, Nell. This was awesome. You have some great opinions.
Thank you.
And I hope you can join us for the last part, can you?
I'll be around for some of it, sure.
Right, you said the first hours, or you said the first half or so. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I might have to leave a bit early, but I'll be around for some of it, sure.
No worries. All right, thank you so much, Nell. Next up, we have, I think, zetamath, I want to say. Let me look at my own schedule. But thank you so much, and I'll have a great rest of your day. And I hope you can stick around for the rest of the stream and listen. All right, I think it is zetamath, so... And I know Zeta has been furiously typing in the chat the whole time, so this should be interesting.
If you don't mind, I'd like to start by elaborating slightly on my horizontal versus vertical difficulty,
Yes,
and
please.
the difficulty creep that goes with these things. So, roughly speaking, I think there's two ways a puzzle can be difficult. So it can be horizontal and that it requires you, it can be horizontally difficult and that requires you to think in new ways. And so there's all kinds of puzzles that require you to have new thoughts and new ways. And so as time goes on, people think of a whole bunch of new kinds of thought. And the more new kinds of thought there are, the more difficult puzzles get because there's so many different things that can happen.
And this is
This, by the
vertical,
way,
right?
that's horizontal.
Oh, that's horizontal. Okay, I completely misunderstood your point.
This is reminiscent, by the way. I talk about this a great deal in my setter video. If you want to go back and look at that,
I have watched your setter video, but I've been doing like the dishes or making dinner or something, so some of it has been lost in working memory.
Versus, there's a vertical difficulty where it directly builds on knowledge you already have. So I think Nell called this meta knowledge.
Right.
This is things where, okay, in order to figure out this, you have to combine this and this and this, and you have to know this technique and know this other technique, and various sorts of things. So let me show you what LMD thinks is, I'm going to put this in the voice channel. This is what LMD thinks is my easiest puzzle. If you could throw that up on screen, I put it in the voice channel. I don't know if I was supposed to put it somewhere else.
No, it's okay. I can do that. We'll just stream. I will open it in my browser and then stream my browser. That's what I'm going to do.
So this puzzle involves completely standard constraints. So it involves X's, V's, arrows, and whispers and renban, the given digit for good measure. Everything involved in the solve of this is quote unquote standard. But ultimately, the first step of this puzzle, and I believe it's basically a required step, is that you have to notice that there's a swordfish on 5s hidden in this grid. And so in order to spot that swordfish on 5s, you have to think about how 5s interact with X's, how they interact with whispers, how they interact with those arrows, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this puzzle is, I believe, actually my most vertically difficult puzzle of all the puzzles I have made. I think this is the only puzzle, perhaps aside from Cacophony, which was a direct sequel to this, that requires the things that are being called, the things that Nell is calling meta-knowledge, that requires you to put together all of these specific things. And I think basically if you put this puzzle in front of someone who was an intermediate level solver, they would have basically no chance of solving this puzzle because it requires all of these things. But of course, everyone on LMD, because as noted on LMD, there's a huge barrier just to set up an LMD account and to write on it. On LMD, this is rated as the easiest puzzle I've ever made because you don't get on LMD without knowing those things, basically.
And what is the rating, if you don't mind me asking?
It is a low 3.
That's the easiest puzzle you've ever made?
That's the easiest puzzle I've ever made, according to LMD.
Okay.
And that's of puzzles I posted on LMD. But you can also, because you can see the breakdowns, I actually know that of all the 3s I've ever put on LMD, this is the 3 that people think is the lowest. But on the other hand, I have lots of puzzles that are rated as 5s on LMD that have shown up on Cracking the Cryptic. And then in the YouTube comments, if you read them, one of the most common comments you get on a YouTube video is, oh, this is the first 5-star puzzle I've ever seen for my puzzle, or I've ever solved.
Yeah.
For my puzzle, sorry. I said seen, I meant solved. So the reason for that is if you take something like MIA, which is not my most recent puzzle, but a recent puzzle that involves constructing cages and this weird negative constraint and all of these different pieces. Almost nothing you can have ever done in Sudoku would be at all helpful to you in solving MIA. So it's
just
very
from the basic
horizontally
rules.
difficult.
Exactly.
The very basic, I can place a 2 in this box might be vaguely helpful. But there's puzzles like that one, and Ouroboros is another one where they basically require you to make nearly entirely new sorts of thinking. And so on LMD, those are easily rated as 5s because nothing they've done before has helped them. But they're still the most accessible puzzles that I've made. So something like MIA is way more likely to get solved by someone who is newer than something like Potpourri, which is the one that I think you have on screen now.
Right.
And so I think it's really important when thinking about difficulty creep to distinguish between these two things, because the reason why I think difficulty creep is potentially bad is that vertical difficulty is a barrier to entry.
Right.
And so if my typical puzzle looked like Potpourri, my puzzles would be less popular because a lot of people cannot do this puzzle unless they have this knowledge. And so I think we really have to be very careful when thinking about difficulty and thinking about inviting people in. And also, this goes to Nell's point about communicating the intended audience of a puzzle. It would be really unfortunate, and I'm guessing this has probably happened, but it would be really unfortunate if someone liked one of my puzzles and did one of my 5-star puzzles, then was like, oh, I'll start at the low end and do Potpourri next.
Oh, no.
It would be really unfortunate because this puzzle is like basically unsolvable unless you know these other things that you're probably not going to discover for yourself, especially
Right.
in the midst. Like I'm not claiming that no one has ever discovered a swordfish for themselves, but you're probably not likely to discover a swordfish yourself if you don't have a lot of experience with all of these other constraints, at which point you probably have seen a swordfish before. So I think that's something to think about, and I think there's a lot of setters going in different directions with this. So I think there are a lot of setters who set very vertically difficult puzzles, but I think there's also a lot of setters who set very horizontally difficult puzzles. Like I think KNT, for example, just to call it a newer setter, I think tends to set horizontally difficult puzzles. Their puzzles tend to involve just a bunch of new sorts of thinking, and
Yeah.
they do that. So anyway, so I think that distinction is something important for you to communicate, and I think it's important to think about when you're thinking about is difficulty creep good or bad. I think it's important to think about it from a new incoming person point of view.
I,
Uh,
I I kind of had a thought like with horizontal and vertical, it's almost like if you plop yourself into like a new city, if you move to a new city, right? Then you sort of know the area around you, and that's sort of like the horizontal difficulty. But knowing what is in each sort of like building or shop or what the shops sell or that sort of thing, that's more vertical difficulty. So like finding your way around a new city is sort of like the horizontal vertical difficulty. You can grow your sort of horizontal area that you know about, but you can maybe just drive around there, right? You just sort of see the sights. You sort of little bit of understanding, but don't completely encapsulate it. Is that sort of good metaphor for that?
I think that's a fair way to say it. And so your knowledge sort of gets involved in these things. And in the case of vertical difficulty, I think the way you learn most things about vertical difficulty is to be told them.
Right, yeah.
Uh,
Google.
yeah, so you get told them by, well, probably by someone on CTC, frankly, because otherwise your option is to learn about them from these sites that have these horrible diagrams of circled candidate numbers that try and explain things. I don't know how many people have tried to learn Sudoku techniques from these sites, but it is I spent, I don't know, like 2 hours trying to figure out what an exoset was the other day. That I did not succeed in discovering what an exoset was. So I need Simon to explain what an exoset is.
I think only the
Okay, so
people who only the people who are explaining it to everyone else have understood these and probably made them themselves. And now
I
they're
will
spreading their
admit,
knowledge to us.
I will admit I specifically set cacophony for the single reason that I didn't understand what a skyscraper was, and I hoped that Simon would do it and explain to me what a skyscraper was. And that
Wait, you
happened.
set the puzzle
So
without understanding what it was?
I did not really understand what a skyscraper was. I
Oh,
could understand it well enough to like set a puzzle that required a skyscraper to solve, but not well enough to actually make it happen. So
right.
yeah, so that was. But afterwards, Simon explained it. It's like, oh wow, this is way simpler than I understood. Okay, so Niverio has a question for me, which is, where do you think ambiguity puzzles overall lie in the horizontal versus vertical? I think ambiguity puzzles are usually more vertical than other puzzles, because usually an ambiguity puzzle involves understanding both of the constraints involved
Yes.
decently well before you can attempt uh, the ambiguity puzzle. But I also think that it tends to be fairly self-policing in that I think most people are not going to attempt an ambiguity puzzle that is ambiguous between two constraints that they're not familiar with.
I think
So actually,
the one part that is maybe more horizontal with ambiguity is when for example, with dynamic duos, where it says these lines can't be two things at once. That's more horizontal because no one has ever really thought about, oh, well, can this line both be a lockout line and a German whisper? Like, no one thinks about that, right?
Right. So yeah,
that's the more horizontal part of it.
There is some horizontal logic, but there's definitely something intrinsically vertical about saying, take what you know about thermos and arrows and apply it to decide to deal with this grid where you don't know which is which.
Exactly.
I'll actually say one of the ways, so there's a lot of talk about communicating audience. One of the things I think about a lot in writing descriptions of my puzzles is, do I define what the standard constraints mean? So do I explain what a between line is? So for example, in the most recent puzzle that Tallcat and I made together, I said standard between line rules apply, period, no explanation, which is my way of saying, subtly or not subtly, if you've not done a between line puzzle before, probably don't look at this one. Whereas if I have a puzzle that uses standard constraints where I think it would be an appropriate puzzle for someone's first or second Renbon puzzle or whatever, like Distinction, for example, I think is a Renbon puzzle that I made, then I will spell it out explicitly. So
interesting.
I don't know if other people think about this, but this is something I think about a lot in communicating.
I don't know if that's effective, because I think people would just look it up. If everyone did this, if this was a convention that everyone would follow, then I think that would work incredibly well. But since it's not a convention, and many people just say standard Renban rules apply, people are used to just looking it up if it says that.
I mean, I think most people are not like, I mean, certainly we know how many puzzles there are out there. I think it's very easy to move on to the next puzzle. If there's anything that if there's anything about it that's like, I'm not sure about this, then just move on to the next one. I think is my usual technique. So I suspect it works, but maybe it does nothing. Who knows? But
it's hard to move on from your puzzles, Zeta.
It's possible. Well, you know, but the thinking about audience and thinking about, like, would this puzzle be a good puzzle for someone to do if they had not thought about this constraint before, I think is a good thing to think about when you're setting the puzzle, and maybe we could all do better at communicating it in our
I think
settings.
You would have more success if you just put below the between lines portion. If you've never done between lines before, maybe skip this puzzle. Like, just literally say that.
See, but I know the people on LMD, and I can already picture 3 people on LMD would have a comment below that would say, actually, this puzzle's not so bad. I think anyone could do this puzzle, really. My dog did this puzzle, and it only took them 20 minutes. Yeah. So I don't... I think with LMD specifically, that is not a good idea because of the resulting comments. But I could imagine that in a broader puzzle community, it would be a good thing to do.
Yeah.
I've basically stopped posting to the CTC Discord puzzle archive because I find it so annoying to interact with, which is I think the fact that I find posting things to LMD less annoying is somewhat of an indictment. But I would like...
I have the same opinion. But you almost changed my opinion when you said that you like to look at the picture of the grid to see if you want to solve the puzzle or not. And I was like, that's a good idea. I do
love that from a user point of view, is that, like, especially for, like, deciding if I want to do some setter I've not known's puzzle before, seeing the grid can often tell me.
And then you have to open the link, and if you want to, like, look through a bunch of puzzles, then you have to open all the links and look at all the puzzles. It's just, like, too much work.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely, yeah. There's a lot of room for something that obviates the need for both LMD and the Discord puzzle archive.
That's not a bad idea Pallando is one thing you can do is add a link to say if you're not familiar with this mechanic, here's a simple tutorial puzzle introducing it. But I think for like between lines, it would be kind of weird to do that. I think people would get weirded out if you did that.
I do think that's a pretty good idea. Just link to the Kurobon puzzle about it, because the 2-star Kurobon puzzle for every single constraint is a great puzzle, at least of the ones I've done so far. But, I have contemplated like naming the puzzle, like if I name the puzzle a swordfish on fives, then maybe that sort of communicates what needs to be communicated in a clear way. I'm not sure.
And if you don't know what a swordfish is, don't solve this puzzle.
I mean, if you don't know what a swordfish is, then maybe you title it. Now, I have all the time it'll happen that people will put like the Portuguese word for fireworks will be the title of the puzzle.
Right.
Which is their hint that it involves fireworks, but I don't speak Portuguese, so I rely on my chat to tell me that the title is actually telling me that I need to think about fireworks and understand what they are, or
Well,
let Tallcat explain them to me.
Why would you know the Portuguese word for fireworks? It's just off the top of your head.
I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing to do. I think it's cute. I think like I think it's like a neat little Easter egg.
It is an Easter egg, yeah. You don't need it, but
yeah, putting set in the title, yeah. Although we won't talk about how many times I've accidentally done a puzzle that did have set in all caps in the titles without realizing that it was going to be a set puzzle. I think it's happened on stream at least twice.
It's happened with one of my puzzles, and I don't even use set in my puzzles usually. I did it in one puzzle and then regretted it, and that puzzle is no longer an LMD.
Let's see. Yeah, set would be a perfect example of a very vertical.
Vertical, yes.
Very vertical technique, which is part of why I don't like it in general, is that I think it's sort of like it's in crowdy and not very rewarding. Like the only thing you're really doing if you're using set most of the time is you're like, aha, I know, someone has told me this before, and so therefore I can solve this puzzle.
Yeah, pretty much.
Which is not, I don't know. Maybe this is just revealing more about me as a solver, but it's not really not as satisfying to me as a solver.
Perhaps we should refocus. I'll ask you a question.
Yeah.
Okay, so just generally, what makes a puzzle difficult and fun versus difficult and unfun? What is the distinction there?
I would say for me, a lot of the time, if I'm consciously thinking while I'm doing a puzzle that this is difficult, that means it's probably not fun.
Right.
For me personally, as a solver, like I like to do puzzles where I'm making continuous progress, and I don't care if that continuous progress goes on for 4 hours. Like Andrew Sarkis is in chat. Like I think I don't think when I was doing Naplu Ultra, which is this like super ultra chaos construction S cell monstrosity, that is one of my favorite puzzles of the year. I don't think I ever was sitting there going like, this is difficult. I was constantly making progress. It just so happened that there were, as someone put it to me before I solved it, about 200 non-trivial steps involved in the process of it. So I'd say for me personally, if I start thinking this is difficult, it's usually not a good thing.
Right.
But that's probably going to be different for different people.
So when do you start thinking this is difficult? If you can't make progress?
So if I can't make progress, or if I feel like I'm being baited into doing look ahead.
Right. Okay.
So I would say look ahead depth is also a vertical thing, but it's also something I just find like incredibly sort of painful personally. But I think that's usually when I start thinking the word difficult is when I have to think, okay, I have to understand that this 3 in box 3 would break this cell in box 7 through this Renbon, this between line, this whisper, and this arrow. And then this cell would have no value. That is when I start thinking like things are difficult, but it's not a compliment.
Yeah. There was a recent step in assignment solve. I think it was Denver by, I can't say his name, but it was a killer Sudoku, and Simon was like, "Oh, if this cell is a 2," and then went through like 7 steps, and then he's like, "Then these 2 cells neither could be 8 or 9 because of row this and row that," and I'm like, "What? How did you see that, and why are you using it?" And he said, "And it's quite beautiful," and I was like, "No, it's not." And
Is it?
I am 0% confident that that was intentional. Like, it was definitely not necessary to do that.
As someone who streams a lot of the time, I get a lot of comments from people where they see something like that and they explain it, and then I see it, and I'm always in this awkward position of being like,
No.
do I think this was intended? Am I going to use it? But I mean, very often what I'll end up doing is I'll use it and I'll say I don't like it, but I always feel like I have to like add this caveat, like, but I'm not saying anything about the setter, because probably the setter had some much more elegant way of seeing this thing that I am not seeing, and that is not being suggested to me, but I'm going to use it so I can move on or whatever, because it feels a little weird when streaming to like have someone tell you that this digit can't be a 9 and understand that it can't be a 9 and then not use it.
Yeah.
But it's a weird thing. But I mean, I think for people who just because there's just a comment on the fact that different people like different things, I think people who really like speed solving really enjoy that kind of look ahead and being good at it. And so I think a lot of the times when people share those things in chat where they have seen this thing, and I bet this is part of why Simon saw it, is it's because they enjoy speed solving. And I mean, more power to them if that's what they enjoy. But it's usually not what I'm hoping to find, is that 7 steps later I violate this hidden pair in box 3 or whatever, like you were discussing.
Yeah. So you said that a difficult puzzle becomes unfun when you get stuck. So how does how do you define smoothness? Because I feel like that's a very good word to describe what you're saying. Smoothness in a puzzle. Do you know what I mean by that?
So I think I would say so. I think it doesn't necessarily have to mean that I'm adding pencil marks to the grid continuously, although I think a puzzle is smooth if I feel I'm continuously adding pencil marks
Right.
to the grid. But I would say, I'll call it Tall Cat specifically, I think makes puzzles that are really inclined towards what I call productive staring,
Right.
where I'm not making progress on the screen that you can see, but I know exactly what I'm thinking about, and I'm confident that the thing I'm thinking about is the right thing to be thinking about. And I know
Right.
if I think about it long enough and hard enough, it will lead to pencil marks in the grid.
Mm-hmm.
If the points where something is not smooth are the points where I'm looking at the grid and I'm just sort of like my eyes are darting all over the place because I don't even know what I'm supposed to look at, and
Right.
like nothing looks appealing. Uh, like when someone in chat is like, you can pencil mark 5 into 4 places in box 7, and I'm like, ugh, I hope that's not what I'm supposed to be looking at. But I just honestly don't know. I feel like that that lack of thing to focus on and the no apparent thing to focus on, that's when I start to feel like something has become anti-smooth, bumpy or whatever.
it's it's almost like my faith in the setter is at a maximum when we start the puzzle, right? And then my faith declines the longer I feel like I can't go anywhere. Like, I feel like there is no intentional logic. You know what I mean?
Right, right. And some people in chat are like Niverio are talking about how a lot of this has to do with trust in the setter.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think how well do I know the setter? Not like personally, but how many puzzles have I done to know, like, if I'm thinking about this, it's definitely not what they intended.
Right.
Versus maybe I don't know. Like maybe this is a newer setter who F Puzzles told that this thing had to be a 6. And they were like, actually, if you look far enough ahead, you can see that this has to be a 6. So I'll go with it. I think we can all admit that we've done that in puzzles when we shouldn't have.
Yes.
I definitely have done that in puzzles when I shouldn't have. So I think that is that is a thing that also informs smoothness versus bumpiness and how willing I am to sort of like keep pushing.
Right. Well,
Sounds like that's my time though.
yes, that is your time. You heard the timer. Yes. Yeah. So thank you so much. This was great.
Thank
to
you for
hear
having
your
me. This
thoughts.
is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I enjoy these, and I will be happy to join in the future if this happens during times when I'm not teaching. But
Perfect.
good luck. I look forward to hearing what other people have to say.
Yeah, I
Bye.
do as well. Goodbye. Next.
Bye from Zach too.
Okay. Goodbye, Zach. Next up, we have Niverio.
On such things, I can open camera if requested.
Balance is good.
My average pace and such.
Whatever you're comfortable with. You don't have to. I won't force you to.
Now, of course, I would like everyone to see my hands roving around while I'm making all of my explanations. Of course.
Yeah.
The teaching instinct. But yeah. Okay, so difficult creep, like I have thought a little bit while this discussion has been going on.
Yeah.
And from my personal experiences, what I think about difficult creep overall is the first thing I want to touch on is, in my opinion, how difficulty gets ramped up. Like, in my opinion, there are many different ways. Like, we have had so many different definitions here, like Zeta approach with the vertical versus horizontal approach. But I think there is also a few other factors in that are not really directed to individual deductions themselves being hard,
Okay.
but it also is kind of linked with the flow of the puzzle for me. Like I have had a few puzzle solves on my overall solving streams where like I start solving a puzzle, it has a nice opening, it is going well. Like the deductions are hard, but like we are getting through them, they are well connected. And sometimes in puzzles there's a step that is complete out of nowhere. Like it might be something like Sudoku. Like this is going to be an extreme example, but let's say you are solving a hard arrow puzzle. Like you come to the mid solve, you do lots of arrow logic, either min-maxing, some local arrow logic, and then out of nowhere, the next step requires you to use a viving, for example. And normally, in my eyes, that this is not a specifically hard deduction. Like you can find many vivings in classics that are not really too difficult. But for an arrow puzzle, and from what the solver expects, it might just not be something that the solver looks for, and that might increase the solve time drastically. And for people who rate the puzzle's difficulty by their solve time, this might be something that ramps up the difficulty of a puzzle, which is not actually difficult at all. It is just something different that the solver didn't expect, and it is like a breach of the flow of the puzzle, that a step comes in which is completely unexpected out of the blue. I can think that I have, and this is just an example that this can occur at many different aspects of puzzling. And for me, as a puzzle setter, and when I'm solving a puzzle that I really expect it to be very fun, I want to make sure that when I'm setting this puzzle, it has a nice flow. And if there's a such step required that it is going to break the flow of the puzzle, I usually tend to try to find alternative ways which are going to be better for such things. And sometimes some setters do not do that, and like that is going to make the puzzle jump up one difficulty tier all alone by itself, even sometimes two. Like some puzzles get rated as 4 or 5 just because there's one step in the middle that the solvers do not expect. And in my opinion, like I think personally difficult creep is not objectively a bad thing, but I really expect the setters for puzzles to be responsible about solving difficult puzzles. And personally, like for when it comes to difficulty itself, and when I say that the setters must be more responsible, what I mean is, like, it is possible that a setter sets off to make a really difficult puzzle. That is sometimes the case. It is completely okay if the solver of the puzzle is also aware of the fact that sometimes some solvers really like a challenge. I'm actually one of them. Normally, when I solve a hard puzzle, I do it willingly just to make sure to understand what the setter has put into the puzzle that is unique, and I try to understand what makes it so hard.
Yeah.
And usually what I expect is to be rewarded when I see some of those hard deductions. And this is where the topic of difficult versus fun comes into play.
Mhm.
I really think a very difficult puzzle can still be extremely fun. And my most recent example for this is the puzzle that got featured yesterday. That is KNT's Croto Killer. It is like I solved the puzzle. It took me 70 minutes overall. And I solved it like I was talking to KNT all the time. And it is just a puzzle that has deduction over deduction over deduction. And they're overall not easy to see. You always have to think through. But that puzzle had such a good flow in the terms of how the deductions felt. There was no random step out of nowhere. Everything was intertwined so well. And even until the last digit placed, the puzzle did not actually go too easy. And the puzzle had lots of clues in them, but none of the clues were extremely strong in the sense that not a singular clue let you fill 20 digits into the puzzle. And that puzzle was so beautifully constructed in such a difficult way that I never felt lost. I never felt I was actually solving a extremely difficult puzzle. I was never really sweating over it. But like I just finished the puzzle and I was like, oh my god, that has been 70 minutes past. Even though I didn't realize it. It felt like 40 to me
Right.
when I was solving it. And that is the mark of a great puzzle that can also be difficult.
Yeah.
And there are, on the other side of things, there are some other puzzles that also take me 70 minutes or 80 minutes sometimes, or sometimes even hours. Like
Yeah.
people in my Twitch chats know that. And sometimes it's just random staring into the grid until you find something. And in my opinion, that if you are going to place a very, very difficult step into a puzzle, that should have a specific reason for it. Your reason might be just I want to make a hard puzzle that the solvers will grind through. That's also fine. But if you do that, I think you also should make the hard deductions rewarding. Like,
Right.
I'm going to call out some puzzles out. Like, I'm sorry if any of the setters are here. These are my honest opinions, so you can take that as feedback to you.
It's okay.
For example, there's a puzzle by Filuta called Friends in Unknown Lands. It's a chaos construction puzzle. And it has a very lovely opening. Like, it has a very nice break-in that you have to think through, you have to calculate things, you have to understand how friendly cells work to get to the opening. And that part is completely amazing. I really enjoyed that. And then we were solving this puzzle with KNT together. And we spent 3 hours on it. And there were so many moments where we grinded a deduction for 20 minutes long. And our reward was 2 pencil marks erased from 2 cells. And like we had Filuta in the chat as well at the second part of the solve, and we were asking like, is this the intended way to solve this? And because, like, in my opinion, that shouldn't be the case, but it was. Like he said, like those are the ways that get the puzzle forward, and that is really something that can offput so many solvers of the puzzle. That when you are investing your brain power to get some deductions, and then you're not getting anything in return.
Okay.
And
I do
that
want to
is
say
definitely something. Yeah, go ahead.
So this thing, what you're saying right now, gets talked about quite a bit in like Voice Call 1, if you're ever active in there. It gets talked about quite a bit that there are puzzles that they're really hard, and then maybe the setter said that it's intended to be hard like that. But I have a question. Do you think it's okay for the puzzle to still have those like very long periods of time where there's nothing happening, and then you get one tiny thing but it doesn't do anything, and that's many solvers' experience? Is it okay if the setter did not intend for that logic to be there, or has this puzzle is this a not good puzzle because people can't actually find the thing?
Personally, I think it is not okay in the sense that like it is, I would respect the setter for putting that in there, but it would really, like, if there is 1 or 2 steps in the puzzle that are like that, I would really think twice before giving 100% rating on that puzzle.
Right.
Especially because that kills the fun for me somewhat. Now, there are some instances where you set a puzzle for a specific reason that allows those deductions. And I have a puzzle like that myself. It is called the S-Cell Miracle. It is honestly a 6 out of 5 puzzle. But the main reason that puzzle is so difficult, and I allowed myself it to be that difficult, is it was a challenge puzzle. It was a challenge created in response to Kolot's challenge, where he challenged people to create a puzzle that has only outside clues that are either question marks or arrows, nothing in the grid, and you have to make a rule that would make the puzzle just solve. And like it should have a relatively decent path. And I think that the break-in is good. There is a relatively good puzzle in there. But there's 2 steps in there. Is that they are somewhat unfair. In my test solve, I forgot one of them, and the test solve took me 2 hours because I forgot one of those steps, and I had to rediscover it.
Right.
So in some cases, it is possible. But what I did when I was setting that puzzle and published onto LMD, I legit wrote on there that this is a challenge puzzle. It is extremely difficult. I'm warning all of you guys who are solving it.
Right.
So I was expecting the solver to know what they are going into when they went into the puzzle. Like in such cases, that is my method. Like if I'm going to do something extremely difficult that might not be fun for some solvers, I give a warning to people who might solve it beforehand so that they know such steps are in the puzzle and that may be the intended path of doing the puzzle.
Right.
Like that is my somewhat long answer.
Now,
Andrew, Fractured wasn't horrible. Fractured was, in my eyes, it was just a decent puzzle with no memorable moment in it. It was just deduction after deduction, but none of those deductions were memorable for me.
Interesting. I didn't solve it, but and I will never solve it. Since we're talking about brutally difficult puzzles and stuff like that, I do want to ask a question that I have in this notepad of questions that is very related to this. How do you think stamina impacts the perception of difficulty?
In my eyes, I actually was talking to KNT about this the other day. Like we have a chat with me, KNT, and TNC where we talked about these a little bit. And in my opinion, like personally, when I rate difficulty of a puzzle, I do take the solve time as my biggest metric.
Right.
But I do not take it as my only metric.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have rated some puzzles that took me 20 minutes still as a 4-star. Because sometimes, especially when you are a solver that is accustomed to solving these hard puzzles. Like I am a solver that, like if you go to my LMD profile, you will see that 80% of my overall solves are either 5 or 4 stars. And I have very low 2 and 1-star solves. And sometimes when you solve puzzles from specific setters that are setting hard puzzles, you get some sense of deduction type that setter puts into their puzzles. And that deduction might be something extremely hard, and there might be lots of those steps in the puzzle, but there are sometimes occasions that I spot them extremely quickly, even though they are the hardest step in the puzzle. And that shortens the solve time considerably. But even though, like, I look at this puzzle time at the end, let's say it's a 20-minute solve, and I say, but no, I cannot give this a 2.5 in my eyes. That is my overall solve.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if something takes 20 minutes, I think about between 2 and 3. But sometimes I go, okay, this puzzle, I solved it quickly, but I am aware that most of the people are not going to spot the things that I luckily spotted that quickly. Mm-hmm. So I always have that conversation in the back of my head. That, like, I get to first think about my solve duration and then extend it in the course of the individual deductions in the puzzle. When it comes to stamina, like this is more of a question for 4 and 5-star difficulty puzzles. It depends. Like, for example, the Fractured is a complete stamina puzzle in my eyes. It is a very long solve because it has lots and lots and lots of deductions in it. None of those deductions are extremely hard, and Nell Gwyn Ultra as well, as zetamath put that in as well. Like, there are pretty similar puzzles in there that are just tiring you out, and that depends on the solver a little bit, like what type of solver you are. There are some people who cannot solve for a long period of time. I am not that kind that I like to think about myself. And sometimes I really do enjoy a puzzle that takes me quite a lot of time. Like Nell Gwyn Ultra was actually one of those puzzles for me. I really enjoyed solving that one.
Which one,
even though it was just the Nell Gwyn Ultra, I really liked
Nell plus Ultra.
when I was solving it. because it was just a grind, and it was never a difficulty spike in there. And it also had a few great deductions that I really was ecstatic about finding.
Okay, I'll give a little. Since Andrew asked for a roast, I'll give him a little roast. I didn't like Me Plus Ultra at all. I felt it was incredibly easy to make mistakes in the puzzle because of all the negative constraints, which was what turned me off of the puzzle, to be honest. Because I did make mistakes constantly, thinking, oh, this can't go this way because of that. Oh no, it could do that in this one very specific scenario that I didn't consider that is the exact scenario in which the puzzle solves. Ah.
Yep. Okay. And like in the remaining time, I would also like to touch on something that I have been really feeling recently.
Yeah.
And this is going to be somewhat of a different point. Like I also mentioned it briefly in the comments while I was talking about in the other people, is that in the main sense of difficult creep these days for me is this overall the setter's mentality of setting puzzles in my eyes. Like I have been solving hard puzzles for almost like over a year now.
Yeah.
And what I'm noticing recently is I think what has increased in difficulty about puzzles is not specifically that the deductions are getting harder. Like there
Okay.
has always been extremely hard deductions in puzzles in the even earlier days when this talk of difficult creep wasn't in there.
Yeah.
But what I'm starting to notice is that on LMD there's a specific group of people that solve the hard puzzles. Like,
Mhm.
and when someone sets a really really hard puzzle that caters to those people, and I joke to Canty about this all the time. Like I said, like he found the hack of LMD. He sets these puzzles that are catering to a specific group of people that enjoy solving them. So he
Yeah.
gets all of those hundreds because the people that wouldn't like them are not solving them.
Exactly.
Like this is the joke part of it. But there's also the truth statement for me that is like when these harder puzzles keep popping up and more people see that these puzzles are getting extremely high praise because they see the ratings of them like 98, 99, 100, back to back to back 5-star puzzles, 98, 99. Some of them get featured on the channel as movies sometimes. And the people who are relatively new to setting these hard puzzles are excited to try out some of these new stuff, especially like the chaos construction trend that has been moving up recently is a biggest example of that.
Mhm.
But what I'm starting to notice is like some people are pushing the boundary of what an acceptable deduction is in the puzzle. And some people, in my opinion, are going way too far with this. In the sense that, like in the first sense, like when the first chaos constructions came out, and the first chaos constructions have been came out by Miss Christopher or Hoped, like CDBG. These are these legendary LMD people who have been setting and solving puzzles from there since 2019, 20, etc. And
Yeah.
now in this 21 and 22, like there are more and more setters coming in. Like I am myself, I started setting in 2021, and I just set my first chaos construction at the like 4 or 5 months ago. And there are lots of people who are like that, who solve their first these hard puzzles. They get excited by them. They try to set some of them themselves.
Mhm.
And the point I'm trying to make is some of these puzzles today are brutally difficult because when the setters are setting the puzzle, um, like there's always a solve path that the setter creates, and sometimes in chaos constructions, or most of the time, what you do is like you put in some clues, like this overall any puzzle, and then you try to figure out what deductions are available from the clue you put. You extract most of it, and then you start thinking about new clues.
Yeah.
And then sometimes, especially with the solver help, there are some steps that the solver finds that the setter analyzes. Okay, should this be in the puzzle? Is this a good thing? And I find out that these days the threshold of the difficulty of certain deductions that a setter would say, whoa, this is like this would put a huge bump in the puzzle difficulty overall. I don't want to have this. I should either revamp the clue or just add another clue to make this transition easier.
Yeah.
Like this was something that I think was a lot more common earlier and not too often happening these days. Like these days, there are a lot of deductions I find in these hard puzzles that the puzzle is hard because of one or two deductions that are like that, and not because of the overall solve path. And the fact that these types of deductions come up over and over again in these hard puzzles is, I think, the main reason why difficulty creep is also going up in the realm of the 5-star puzzles that exist.
Right. And I think it's a bit it's a bit of inexperience as well. Like, there are some constructors who are new to constructing puzzles who are constructing chaos constructions, and they don't understand what is an acceptable deduction yet because they have not had the experiences enough to realize what is and what isn't going to work in a puzzle for a human solver. And honestly, CTC is not helping. It's actually quite hurting when Simon goes through several cases at the beginning of a puzzle to get the break-in, and then says it's the most amazing puzzle he's ever seen, but then it doesn't explain that it might be beautiful, or it might be okay to do that at the beginning of a puzzle, but in the end or middle of a puzzle, doing something like that where you're case checking like 17 different options or even 2 options is just completely unacceptable.
Yeah, like there are some puzzles. Like, I have 2 specific examples in mind recently that, like, I solved a puzzle. Like, I'm not going to name the puzzle specific, but there's one puzzle I solved recently. I started the solve on stream. I couldn't finish it. And the solve took me overall 6 hours. And 4 hours of that solve was case checking after case checking after case checking. And this is a puzzle that when you go into the LMD comments of this, people are praising the hell out of this puzzle. Like, the group of people who really enjoy these very hard puzzles are absolutely adoring it. And when you read the comments, like, it is not rated yet, I don't think. Like, it is only solved by 8 people so far. But like, when you see those comments, when you were to read those comments on any other puzzle, you would expect the puzzle to be something extremely amazing. And like, it was a terrible experience for me. I gave a 2 out of 5 rating for the first time in my life on that puzzle, because I was extremely annoyed about how people were praising it, even though, like, it was pretty obvious that the solve path was just about case checking, and it is not even like once or twice. You had to case check 10 times at least to get to the solution, and most of those deductions that you make resulted in like a few shaded cells, one few digits in the realm of that, and it was an absolute wearing down puzzle for me. Like, I'm normally a person who has lots of stamina. Like, I tend to think like I can do 9-hour puzzle streams without getting tired. I did the caterpillar in a whole stream, but that puzzle in 3 hours like just shut me down like completely, and I had to take a break and I had to come back to just fight with it. And the fact that such puzzles are getting so much praise in the comments is just letting this problem further and further through, because again, like, I don't think these puzzles are getting the honest feedback they deserve to get, in my eyes.
And honest
and that
feedback,
is one part of the problem with it.
Honest feedback is incredibly important to maintaining like a healthy environment for solvers, because if you're not giving honest feedback to the people, then they're getting feedback that says it's good to do what you're doing, but it's actually very harmful to do what they're doing, and it's just continuing to perpetuate that problem.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like, people just need to have, like, again, in my eyes, if you want to set a successful hard puzzle, like, this is always the cliche thing that everybody is saying, but people say it because it's true. You have to solve good hard puzzles to set good hard puzzles, because then
but the good
you
hard
will
puzzles,
have the experience.
The Niverio, problem is that the good hard puzzles now are mixed in with the other puzzles that have the what you're talking about, right? So there's a big problem because people solve the puzzles that have this problem and they say, oh, it's okay to do that. Or maybe they miss a step and they do something weird and then they say, oh, it's okay to do that. But anyways, we're out of time now. So we have to move on, but I would talk about this forever, of course, because I very, you know.
Yeah, I will be around for the group discussion too, so
Okay.
I'm looking forward to that.
And thank you so much for participating.
Yep,
Love
thank you
talking
for
to you.
having me.
All right. Next up we have Nordy. All right.
Cool. Well, I want to introduce myself. I'm Nordy. Hi, everyone. Longtime lurker. Glad to be part of the community now. Really like this discussion so far. I wanted to modify my topic and just wherever it takes us, I think is good for me.
Sure. No worries.
I was interested in getting your thoughts on kind of the goals that you have when setting a puzzle, whether to make it to explore a new constraint you're working with, or to, look for beautiful logic for something, a break-in idea. And then specifically with difficulty, I recently have been experimenting with specifically trying to create puzzles of a certain difficulty. So I'm wondering if you've ever had that goal yourself, like I want to create a 2-star puzzle, and then how you might approach it.
Not necessarily I want to create a 2-star puzzle, but I often think I don't want this puzzle to be too hard. And whenever I think that, I will be incredibly like vicious to myself with any step. If it is at all like somewhat not obvious or like very slightly far out of the range of like what someone could do if they normally solve gas puzzles. Just 1 second. Just 1 second.
So you're good.
Yeah, it wasn't.
So
it wasn't
sounds like you
bad.
cap you're when you're sort of in a puzzle and it's developing, you can kind of set a cap for yourself. Like, I don't want this to get much more difficult than this step or this idea, something along those lines.
Well, so here's how I go about setting an easy puzzle. I look at, so I usually develop some kind of break-in that seems too obvious to ignore, like just some ridiculous thing with like 83 cell arrows or something like that. And if that's like simple enough that it doesn't do something ridiculous, then what I'll do is I will stop setting. I'll take it into CTC and I'll just solve and I'll see what's the first pencil mark that I get from this. Just simple. What's the first simple pencil mark I get from this? And then think about if I could add something into the sort of cells that, like, say a 5 is for, so the left side of box 3 or something like that. Can I add a clue in the left side of box 3 so that someone who gets this first pencil mark is like, oh, and then I can use this. And then I make sure they can use that. And then I just do that repeatedly until either it breaks or I don't like it, or I go back sometimes and resolve over and over again. Like zetamath says, my distinct arrows puzzle is one of his favorite easy puzzles of all time, because, and that's the same thing I did with that. I put in the thing on the left side, and then I literally just put in box 3 a arrow with like a bunch of little two cell segments off of it, and it was like all arrows have unique combinations, right? So there's only one possible value it could be 9, and then well, these 4 combinations are of 9, but there's only 4 combinations. I don't know what order they're in, but I know I can't use any 2-cell 9 arrows. So then the rest of the puzzle sort of falls out from that.
Very cool. Yeah, that makes sense.
How do you go about doing that?
Well, yeah, I've been exploring the idea of having a goal of creating a specific difficulty puzzle, 3 stars specifically, and I think it was more of a personal goal because I wanted to also explore what the word smooth means, which I think is a very interesting word
My
related to
favorite word.
solving. Yeah, it's a good word. And so for me, one thing I definitely look for is how many steps ahead that I'm seeing in my mind. So one of my puzzles, it was like most of the steps where you had to think maybe 2 to 3 steps ahead, which I think is very reasonable.
What do you mean by steps ahead, just before we continue?
Yeah, so it's like if there's a 3-cell 6 cage, it's 1, 2, 3. Forces, and that's like one step, right?
Right.
And then you go into some other cage and it removes those values. Still one step here. But then maybe it restricts some new cage to 2 values, and you test both those values and see how they affect maybe a third cage.
Right.
And then now we're approaching kind of like 2 steps, because you're kind of juggling between one option or another and just seeing the effects there. And I didn't want anything to get more complicated than that. And so if I found a clue that was more complicated than that, say I needed to go see the ripple effects through 3 different cages, I would say that's way too hard.
Right.
And restrict my clues based on that. So that was very specifically like, I'm viewing this 3-star puzzle as having a certain max length chain. And that's how I went about that puzzle. And I think it really came through as a smooth 3 stars. So
now, I wouldn't describe what you are describing as like a chain, but more like direct implication. You know?
sure. Yeah, I sometimes use my vocab fast and loose, but
No,
I
it's
would
okay.
agree with that.
Like maybe you're saying you don't want to have any chains, which I would say generally, like, it's good to not have any chains in general. But sometimes some value does a lot of things and it's really forcing it. It's like, I can see that pretty easily once, like, and that would be like sort of a chain, but there's like a loose definition of it. But the thing you're saying is that you only wanted direct implication sort of eliminations. So if this was a 6 and it'd be 1, 2, 3, then it would eliminate 1, 2, 3 from a cell that had to have 1, 2, 3 in it. So it can't be a 6, right? Is that the only sort of thing you wanted to do?
Yeah. And maybe just slightly harder than that.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes a good 3-star, I think.
Nice, because that was my follow-up question, which is 1-star and 5-star puzzles are somewhat, 1-star includes all of the easiest, 5-star includes up to like 8 stars. I've seen some what seem to be 8-star puzzles on LMD, but I'm wondering how to differentiate between 2, 3, and 4, because one way that I would like to think about combating difficulty creep, if it needs to be, I'm still on the fence about that, is I want to get better at rating my own puzzles. So I'm, more upfront with what people can expect. So I'm wondering how you go about rating your own puzzles, specifically 2, 3, and 4.
Good question. I very rarely rate things as 2 unless, so often what I'll do if I think something is a 2-star is I'll get someone to stream solve it, because then I can actually see if they, because sometimes people say it's a 2-star but they don't actually think it's a 2-star. They're just saying what other people are saying, and that's the main thing that I get my ratings from, is testing. I'll test it myself. I'll get other people to test it, see how long it takes them, how difficult they thought it was. I'll sometimes ask them what the hardest step was, to get a gauge of like what is what is highest on the list of things that you remembered from this puzzle that gave you trouble. That gives me a good gauge of like what was the sort of logic they were doing throughout. And sometimes they'll say something and I'll be like, I have no idea what that is. I don't remember that logic at all. So it means that there are ways that you can obviously miss something, and that would sort of like give me I need to get someone to stream solve this because I don't know what's going on. Like some people are missing something that I thought was like an easy step, but is actually like not at. Sometimes it's weird because it's not at the same level as a different step, so people don't look for that the first time because they just did an easy step and they're looking for next easy step. So then they don't see a slightly harder step, and then they just don't look there at all. Once you lose their attention, it's really hard to understand what the solver is going to do next, actually, which is a big problem.
Yeah. Yeah, you reminded me of another common feeling, which is there are puzzles I've solved at least 20 times of my own. And at that point, I can't even assess the difficulty anymore.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I know every step, I know where to look. I don't even have the ability to like enter the solve as someone who's never seen the puzzle before. So that's a good, shout out for testing and getting other perspectives. I like that.
Also, what you can do is you can wait and don't look at the puzzle for like a few days, a few weeks, and then come back and solve it, and specifically try. Sometimes I specifically don't use deductions that I think are slightly harder than the rest of the puzzle because I'm like, is there another way that someone could get through this, and would it lead back to this other path that I wanted, or is it okay? Like in a deconstruction puzzle that I had worked on for a long time and wanted people to spot a specific geometry thing, I continuously tried to not use that because I was wondering if they don't spot the geometry, how well can they do this? How does it lead back to the geometry at some point? Could they spot it? And my conclusion was yes, but the answer was no. And I never published that puzzle.
Yeah. So then how do you kind of move into 4-star land? What takes a puzzle from 3 to 4 stars?
Usually, like Niverio was saying like one deduction can make something a 3-star puzzle. One deduction that's a lot harder than the rest of it. And as I was saying before, when we were talking about this whole thinking about a solve path as a set of resistors, some of them are in parallel, which means that if you think about it as like a network of rivers, and then there are multiple paths for the water to flow through, but then at some point there's like a dam, right? And that dam, the harder the dam is, sorry, 1 second. Yeah. Anyways, so there's often a dam where you can't sort of go through any other streams of logic. You have to go through that deduction, right? And it depends on how like high that dam is. And if that dam is higher than a 3-star deduction, then your puzzle's probably going to get a lot of 4-star ratings.
I see.
Not necessarily a chain, but maybe I don't know. I tend to get lots of 4-star puzzles when I include one step, which I find is a weird logic step. I think it's kind of like a seems very alien to me, but it made I'm always thinking like this probably has such a simple way of thinking about it, but it just seems so weird to me. And often when I have something like that, it gets rated 4 stars because people are like, how do I do this? How do I proceed? But then the rest of the puzzle just feels pretty smoothly.
Yeah. No, that's also interesting. It's where that dam, where you encounter it. Is it the break-in? Is it, midway through? Maybe there's like 3 or 4 dams, which is probably usually good if they're all similar in difficulty. Yeah, because I'm also thinking of the case where sometimes a puzzle is its hardest step. But I guess I'm wondering how you think about whether there's only one of those steps. So there's one dam, like it's a 3-star puzzle, but there's one 4-star deduction. So to be fair, you rate the puzzle 4 stars. Or are you trying to maximize that level of difficulty for as long as possible when you set? So I'm wondering how you think about so some distinction there of like an extra hard step in a puzzle versus a puzzle that's has a more sustained difficulty.
More sustained difficulty. Well, I think when I'm rating a puzzle is way different than when I'm setting a puzzle. When I'm setting a puzzle, I usually don't think about what the difficulty is going to end up being because it can just widely vary. Like when you change one step, the difficulty could completely oh, I got so confused with Niverio's comment. Sorry.
Yeah, me too.
The difficulty can like widely vary based on like one step is what I was saying before. So trying to set to a difficulty is pretty hard. There are no rules to the background. I set a color brush on a random rotation, random within boundary, and just clicked randomly. But anyways, sorry. Getting back to the discussion. When I'm rating a puzzle, I don't want to rate something that has a 4-star step as 3 stars because like the 4-star step could be sitting there while the person is trying to get other things for a very long time. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And when something is just sitting there and it's too much of a barrier to get over, you start looking at things that are of equal difficulty to that or harder that make the puzzle feel much harder.
I see. I think I see what you're saying. Like you have an expectation of 3-star difficulty deduction, but a 4-star deduction is really what you need to make progress. Is it something like that?
Well, if you can't see any 3-star deduction, right? Then you start looking for something harder. And if you're looking for something harder, the first thing people usually do is they try to chain, right?
Right. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. So, and if they're against chaining or something like that, then the first thing they'll do is look for a 4-star sort of deduction or a higher level difficulty deduction. And through that process, no matter how long it takes them, it will feel like a higher level difficulty puzzle.
For sure. What do you think the role of an intro paragraph is in a puzzle? For example, I posted a puzzle today that has, quote, "This puzzle should be fairly approachable as long as you do a little Sudoku along the way." And because I found it's a bit heavier on Sudoku than most other puzzles I've made, and I'm still mixed on whether or not I should have included that as like a little hint. So I'm wondering how you view, maybe like this puzzle's hard, or don't forget this rule, or something along those lines.
On what are you posting
when you're making a puzzle?
On LMD or on the archive or on testing? Because those are all different to me for this answer.
I guess let's do LMD just because that's what I did.
Okay, I've never put something like that in the intro. But I don't think I would be upset if I read that. I don't know if I would remember it though. You know how in certain puzzles, if you read the rules once and you didn't fully like sort of take them in, and then you start the puzzle, you're like 20 seconds in, read the rules again. If someone reads the intro really fast, or if they don't even read the intro, they might not even remember what you said 20 seconds later when they're doing the puzzle, right?
Oh, for sure.
So I'm not
But
sure.
it's there. It's there
Yeah,
to be
it's
read.
there. It's there to be read. The thing maybe you're asking is, what do I think about hints?
Yeah, I think hints is definitely, if I'm able to stay for the group discussion, I would, potentially like to explore the idea of hints. But there's a lot in the rules. It's like, when do you bold a word? When do you, because I think in a sense bolding, that could go into the realm of hint like.
Yeah.
It's like, well, why did you bold that? And so yeah, I do like a puzzle to stand on its own. So it's like, you don't need an intro paragraph. I'm totally cool with that. I'd say the first half of my puzzles didn't have one because it's like, hey, this is my puzzle, solve it, whatnot. But there's also kind of it becomes, there's a community aspect, and there's a little bit of like, I'm exploring this idea or whatever. And so I found some value in an intro paragraph from time to time. It's not even always about the puzzle. It could be about something different. So
I mean,
yeah, I think that's sort of untapped territory that could potentially, be explored.
I do write intro paragraphs for pretty much every single one of my puzzles. I usually start by explaining why I made the puzzle. I don't know why I do that, but I just do. And that usually leads to me linking to inspirations or
Mm,
other puzzles that I've solved with these constraints that made me think I should set one of those puzzles, so that more puzzles get solved that I think are worth solving. I think is what I'm trying to do, because I was inspired by them. Maybe someone else is inspired by them. If they like my puzzle, then they're definitely going to like this other puzzle, which is probably way better than mine. And then I've started doing this more often, is when I do that inspiration sort of thing, I do at the end, right before the solution code box, I say like, and if you haven't checked out the puzzles from the description, if you like this, just go check them out because you're probably going to like them.
nice. Yeah, I do like seeing a lot of these linking. I've seen them more and more. Um, I look at almost every puzzle on LMD just because of my curiosity, and there's been more, you know, of those chains of links that you can find from one puzzle to the next, and I think that's a good trend.
Yeah, I like that train as well.
Thank you for this opportunity, and I look forward to the group discussion, and I'll hope to join it.
Yeah, thank you for coming. It was great to talk.
Yeah, thanks for hosting. All right, bye.
Bye. All right. Next up, we have the Coggy Show. Hello, the Coggy Show. How are you doing?
I'm good. 1 second. I guess I'll.
Anyways, did you have anything you wanted to talk about? I know you were pretty open to anything, but
Nope. No, no, I do. The
all right, see you. Bye.
it's a little tricky. It's a little tricky because everyone's touched on so much.
Okay, so I have one thing here that I haven't asked anyone else, so I'll ask you right now. So Jovial once gave the opinion that there are two ways to rate a puzzle. One, compare the puzzles the puzzle to all other puzzles and rate from there. Or 2, how hard did you personally find the puzzle to solve? Which one do you rate with?
I'm kind of a pushover as far as ratings go. Honestly, I will usually, in terms of difficulty, I will rate things the way the setter wants them rated, or I just kind of fall in line. That's probably not the healthiest way to approach it. I'm definitely not advocating for that, but that's I guess what Clover would call cooperative rating. I think that it is typically the ratings on LMD line up with my experience. That's not always the case. And certainly if I found that it didn't, the problem for me is that if a puzzle really does not line up with what I'm anticipating, I usually just won't finish it. I mean, you're aware that like I regularly start puzzles and stop them. And if I'm not like certainly I love how supportive the community is, and I try to be a supportive and contributing member to it, but and I'm not going to be mean to someone, but if a puzzle is really unenjoyable for me, there's not much point in me rating it, because either I'm just intentionally doing something I don't like to for for no real reason, or I'm gonna finish it and then just lie about either I'm just like actively trying to make the setter feel bad about their puzzle, or I'm just lying about how I felt about it. And either way, I don't necessarily want to do that.
In terms of difficulty as well?
Yeah. Like if a puzzle says it's 3, I remember there was one in particular Zeta did on his stream, and I mean I didn't solve it independently, but like I was watching. It was I think it was Palindrome and Thermos, and it was to finish the stream. I'm sure Zeta remembers. He may be able to link it, or maybe he has some idea what I'm talking about. But and it was like he pulled it up at like 8 o'clock because he thought it would be a pretty simple puzzle to finish the stream up with, and it was really hard. I couldn't see how to get. We got stuck. The whole stream did. I could not see how to progress. And like in those situations, if I was solving the puzzle myself, I would close. I mean, I have that privilege as someone who is not public facing in any way.
Yeah, I mean, I always say in Zeta's stream, or anyone's stream really, like if you're not enjoying this, just stop. Like you don't have to finish it. And I understand now as a streamer that it's really hard to stop once you start a puzzle. You feel really bad to like stop solving a puzzle, but honestly, I probably just should, if I'm not enjoying a puzzle, just stop solving it.
Yeah, it's I think it's one thing that would probably keep me from being a very, I guess streaming. It's like it's a bit of a balance, because you also have chat helping and stuff, but I don't know how much that would. I mean, I have no basis to be able to say how much that would affect my enjoyment of puzzles. I've never done it, so. But like, I would have a hard time. I really struggled to make myself do a puzzle that I don't like, and I know exactly what puzzle Niverio was talking about, and I also struggled and did not enjoy that puzzle. Struggled with and did not enjoy it. I made myself finish it though, but I shouldn't have, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I mean, you've talked quite a bit about that puzzle with me, so I don't know exactly what. I have not even looked at the rules, but because it happened while I was on vacation. But
it started off hopeful, like it kind of like, I guess that's something else to address, is it started off with some cool logic, and then to me it felt like someone put in the fewest amount of clues necessary to make the rest of the puzzle solve. Not even solve, to make the rest of the puzzle have a solution. I mean,
right.
It was not. I can't imagine. I don't think that there was what I would consider a logical path. I mean, obviously bifurcation, you can argue that anything is like logical if you can track enough things mentally, but it was certainly not to me.
Right. Okay.
And so, yeah, I think that I have to echo some of what Niverio was saying earlier, just in general about puzzles increasingly just really hard. Like, and I do also agree with what you said earlier about CTC. I think that you have, as a community, we have to keep in mind Mark and Simon are content creators first and puzzle solvers. I mean, obviously they started as solvers, right? They were
Right.
solvers and they made a channel around that. But they're what they don't make money because they solve puzzles. They make money because they make YouTube videos.
Right.
And so when Simon spends an hour and a half solving a puzzle, that's not, and of course Simon is going to always, Simon's very, very good about that too. He's very good at I don't know, he has a hazel that's or zeal, however you say it, that's admirable just
Yeah.
about puzzles in general. He's very good at expressing his passion for puzzles.
Absolutely.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that every puzzle he does is takes him an hour and a half is amazing. It doesn't mean that they're all bad either. I mean, I recently had one that was an hour and a half. But
Yeah.
just because he does a really hard puzzle and everyone loves watching it, that doesn't mean that everyone needs to set puzzles that they can watch Simon solve for an hour and a half.
No, actually, it should be the opposite.
Right. That's certainly not my goal. And I know that I set pretty hard puzzles, but I don't. That's because the way I approach setting, I personally kind of set, well, I mean, I suppose somewhat similarly to the way Zeta did in his setting video that he made, where, like, for me, it's kind of like I'm solving as I'm going along, and I just kind of enjoy. There's a certain range of difficulty that I enjoy, and that's kind of where I like. I mean, I set because I enjoy it, so I try to stay in that range, and it tends to be, 4 to 5 stars, low 5, I would say. I don't think I've ever set a puzzle that someone would call a 6 out of 5. I feel that the entire community has been inundated with 5 out of 5s and people raving about 5 out of 5s. And I'm not going to bash on 5 out of 5 puzzles. I think 5 out of 5 puzzles are, can be very fun, but I do think it's a bit unhealthy when a puzzle is just brutally hard, which, like the one that Niverio was talking about, and then people go and encourage people to solve it and give it great feedback and stuff, because it encourages others to produce puzzles like that. And I am certainly not the end all judge of a puzzle's quality, but that puzzle was not the kind of puzzle that I would like to see others try to replicate personally.
Right. And oh my word, what was I saying? Oh, sometimes people praise a puzzle not because they enjoyed solving it, but because they feel that the setter must have put a lot of work into this puzzle. I have done that. I have rated puzzles because I think the setter has put a lot of work into this. I found it interesting, but I didn't love it.
It's hard because if you know someone spent a lot of time on a puzzle,
exactly,
it's hard to,
as a setter, really.
It's hard to shit all over it because
exactly
you have to appreciate the effort. I mean, setting takes a lot of work. It doesn't just happen. So I mean, it's hard to just,
like you were saying, that puzzle, right? You said that he took the break-in and then added the minimum.
I think the beginning was very nicely set and really cool and interesting, and then the end, I mean, yeah.
Even if he did find
we don't need to belabor that puzzle because
no, we haven't even mentioned the name of it.
Yeah, it was definitely insane.
But like, let's say someone, right, made a puzzle and they started with a break-in and then they added the minimum number of clues to make it resolve in maybe a logical way, but maybe not the best way.
Right.
maybe in a logical way, but not the most obvious logical way, and a very hard way to see. That is still a lot of work to do to resolve it in the least amount of clues. So you have to respect that, right?
I mean, Philip, kind of as a joke, he makes puzzles like that. As he'll make he makes really minimal puzzles, just I think out of self-interest, just because he thinks they're cool. I mean, I don't think Philip does them because he wants people to solve them, though. But it's like I think that it definitely is. I mean, and I make very minimal puzzles as well, self-admittedly, but I also have I think there is kind of this like stigma against like just adding a given, like a chaos construction does not. I mean, I had 4 givens in that vault construction, and one of them was not necessary, totally, just not necessary, and actually one of the cages was totally unnecessary, but I added them anyways. And I think that it's something that you definitely need to keep in check. And I know Zeta talks about that a lot with his own puzzles. He says that most of his are overclued. And I think that there are some actual minimal puzzles that are nice to solve. But if the puzzle isn't nice to solve, then it being minimal doesn't justify it, I guess, in my opinion. Like if it's minimal, it's the priority is the solve for me, and if it's minimal, that's cool, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, if it was minimal and I didn't love the solve, I would go back and change it. Like,
yeah, yep. I am in total agreement. That for me, I think that there's a lot of reasons this difficulty creep happens, and it's not just because the rules are getting more complicated. It's also because people. It's very easy to use like a solving assistance, or like ranks solver when setting, and it's very easy. I mean, like I have done it. I think basically everyone has done that, right? I mean, it's literally everyone has done that at some level. Not necessarily saying abuse it, but everyone uses rank solver to help them set at least
something. At least some puzzle.
I mean,
at some point.
Yeah. I mean, I would assume that I would assume that everyone in this chat has used that solver to help them set puzzles, and it's very easy though to then see something's unique, or you see something happening, and then see why it's happening. So you understand the logic behind it, but you lose perspective on telegraphing. You don't, you stop thinking about, well, would I have ever seen this if I hadn't gotten that, if I hadn't been told by the solver that this is restricted, could I have ever found it? And I think that's something that I think that it's really important to keep that in mind, like not just about something being there, it's about people actually finding it and having fun trying to find it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if at every step of a puzzle you had someone whispering in your ear, you can get this digit in this cell, then do you think the puzzle would be a little bit easier than you think it was?
Yeah, and that's actually something that I think also happens in the community. I think that I think that actually happens. I mean, I think that when you stream a puzzle for someone and they give hints, that obviously makes it a lot easier to solve with hints.
And that's not saying don't give hints. Please give hints if people ask.
No, I mean, if someone asks for hints, I think it's very rude to just say no.
Yeah,
certainly. But it does. You have to keep in mind that is going to affect the difficulty. Like knowing that something's there and being like, oh yeah, that was obvious. Anytime someone says, oh, that should have been obvious, that's kind of a tip off to me, because it wasn't. If it was obvious, they would have seen it.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was saying with Niverio, where if there was a logical path and you spent 30 minutes looking, that's almost the same thing I was saying with Nordy, actually, is that, like, if there is a 5-star deduction available, right? And there are no more 4-star deductions available. What we're going to start doing, the solver is going to start doing, is looking for 5-star deductions. And when they're looking for 5-star deductions, they're looking for things that are incredibly hard. And it's going to feel like the puzzle is ridiculously hard, right? So that's the perception of the puzzle. And if they don't see that deduction, then their experience of the entire point between them not finding it and them finding it or being told where it is feels like the puzzle is ridiculously hard, right?
Yeah. I also want to talk about something Nordy just said in the chat about how it can be a lot easier to find new hard logic than it is to find new easy logic. I think that's a good point, but I also think it's worth noting that not everything needs to be new. Every puzzle is its I mean, I personally enjoy finding new things as a setter. So a lot of times I think the reason that my puzzles tend to be 4 or 5 out of 5 difficulty is because usually they have some logic in them that is weird because I found it myself. I hadn't seen it and I just think it's cool and I put it in, and it's not maybe not the easiest thing, but not every puzzle needs to have something totally new in it. You can have a cool puzzle that makes you think, but doesn't make you, doesn't have to be like mind blowing for it to be a fun and interesting puzzle. Yeah, I think Ambrose makes a good point. I mean, I think if anytime it's like, okay, so I mean, look at the Shikaku I made. That puzzle is hard. It's not like if people were solving 5-list puzzles like that all the time, that puzzle would not be very hard. But it's just so weird that of course it's going to be hard.
That's like because you showed me that when you were first setting it, and you're like, yeah, like you can get lots of things, but the ending doesn't work. And I'm like, Kagisho, I have literally no idea how to start this puzzle. But you had been working for like forever with the 5-list grids because you've been studying this puzzle, and you're like, oh, you just do this, it's easy. I'm like,
well, yeah, and I think that fresh logic and new logic, I mean, just going back to Nordy's, I'm just kind of responding to chat for a second. I think that, yeah, I mean, you can find new bits of logic. Typically, though, I guess it really just depends. If a puzzle, there certainly is new logic that is easy, but it's pretty hard to highlight that, to be totally honest. Because if it's new, people aren't going to be thinking about it. So again, kind of inherently, it's going to make things harder for most people. I think like Broken 159 would be a good example of there's certain logic that results from Broken 159 that was new, when that constraint started, and and it was harder for people at first, until people figured it out. It was harder.
And some people never tried it, never figured it out.
Went back and solved the Broken 159 pack. If I did that today, it would probably feel a lot easier than it felt at first.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think Tallcat kind of hits the nail on the head with that old versus fresh, or new versus fresh. There's a lot to say. I think that the community certainly encourages difficulty creep just in general as a whole, because you get, if I'm being honest, the solvers who really like the really hard puzzles are typically the more active members of the community. Not to say that every active member of the community loves really hard puzzles, but the ones who do tend to be more vocal about it, or like, if a puzzle is really hard, it's I'm going to be honest, it's more likely to get comments on LMD. It's more likely to get highly rated. I mean, there's a lot of feedback that you get when you set really, really hard puzzles, and that doesn't necessarily mean that the puzzles are inherently better.
Because people like really hard puzzles.
Yeah.
I almost feel
I mean,
like
I would say I know that Faluda's that's been mentioned. Faluda's friends with, and I don't think that I don't think that puzzle would have that many solves. A puzzle, certainly, I mean, so obviously puzzles are going to progressively get a little harder as solvers and setters get better at puzzles, but I don't think that even scaling for that, it would get that many solves if it had been posted a year prior.
I don't think so.
For example.
I think it would have gotten maybe 2 solves, and a bunch of people tried it but didn't finish. Because people,
No, and I think there's a
solver
group of
threshold is
people
much
who
lower.
seek out really, really hard puzzles, and they always leave comments, and they always rate 5 out of 5. So then those puzzles, you get positive feedback. It's like it just positively reinforces something that doesn't necessarily make the community any healthier. Like, I'm not saying hard puzzles are inherently unhealthy, but having positive feedback heaped on very, very hard puzzles, but not easier ones, almost inarguably, does not make the community healthier, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, that was a good little capstone to this segment, because I think we're out of time. And I think we might have Tyrgannus speak for a couple minutes before we go into a group's discussion. I think everyone can hear.
Okay.
So.
Well, I'm going to jump into this because I'm hijacking and I wasn't actually scheduled. So we're briefly going to talk about rhythm games and Dark Souls. And if you're not if you know nothing of either, there's a reason for both of them.
Okay.
Rhythm games, every single one I've played has difficulty numbers for every chart. Period, end of story. I don't care if it's a dance game, if it's Osu. Every rhythm game I know has a number. And the reason they can get away with that, and why I think difficulty creep works better in rhythm games than in puzzles, is because there is an objective factor to rhythm games. There is BPM, there is rhythm, there is speed, there is stamina. You can somewhat mathematically have a really good estimate on that. The problem with puzzles is that's just not how it works. There are some things that I think are objective.
Well, if I can jump in for a second. Just 1 second.
Oh, my bad.
That's how, that's actually literally how Puzzlink works. Is it takes the amount of time that you take to solve a puzzle in that genre, and it sets it versus the average amount of time it takes someone to solve that puzzle, or not that puzzle, but that genre, and then it groups those into groups, and it just does a horrible job with some puzzles. So, because people know techniques for these puzzles that other people are just learning.
It's actually why the old puzzles are the most difficult on Puzzlink, because the only people to ever go back to 2009 are the good solvers. Yeah, that's a real phenomenon, by the way.
Yeah.
So, anyways, there's some things in puzzles that are a bit objective. Generally speaking, I mean, you can find exceptions if you want to, contradict me. Generally speaking, trips are harder than pairs. Quads are harder than trips. Generally speaking, a 7-cell 35 cage is going to be easier than a 7-cell 38 cage. So there's some objectivity to it, and I think that is forgotten, if I'm being honest. It's very easy to say that difficulty is subjective, and obviously there have to be subjective elements to it, but I think it's key to remember that if the deduction that you want in your path is, I want you to look at the interaction between these two killer cages and they're going to create a virtual pair, that is trickier than you already know the candidates of one.
Right.
So because of that, you can dwindle the candidates of the other. There's objectivity. The first one I said it is a 3 to 4 difficulty, depending on the setup. The other one is like a 2 to 3, heck, a 1, 2, 3, depending on. Yeah.
Depending on what the cages are.
Yeah, exactly. All that stuff. The problem eventually, though, becomes a bit of self-referencing, and that's it's one of the issues that I didn't hear talked about enough. Is we call things a 3 because we call things a 3. Yeah. Really, there is no good way to pin it down. It's like pinning Jello to a wall. While I think a lot of people understand that absolutely perfectly trivial should be a 1, and oh my gosh, only 10 people in the world can solve this should be a 5,
Yeah.
and I have opinions on that in just 1 second, 2, 3, 4 become really hard because of the self-referencing problem. The
Right.
second biggest problem with difficulty creep is that we are using a bounded system, and this to me is the actual biggest problem. By
Right.
using and normalizing a 1 to 5 scale, we are inflating what 2, 3, 4, and 5 are. 1 is pretty much the same. It really hasn't changed. But I honestly think an unbounded scale, as chaotic as that sounds, is better. And that's what rhythm games do. Another thing, DDR used to be 1 to 10, and then they just started making songs that were harder than 10. You know what they rated them? 12s. 13s, 14s, 15s, 16s, 17s. We're up to 19, by the way, if you haven't played DDR in a while. So, yeah, they just add another difficulty. In fact, Endymion probably should be a 20 if you're really into DDR. So, yeah, I think unbounded scales are better. In that case, I think we're up to 7. There is an argument that maybe there's like an 8, 1 or 2, but for the most part, I think we're up to 7 at this point. It's a 7 out of 5 scale. 7 out of 7, really.
Yeah.
And that alone is going to help it. Nothing's perfect. This is a very complicated topic.
I mean, so
yeah, you go.
Astronomers, right? When they didn't know that they thought Earth was in the center of the world, they assigned numbering systems to stars based on their brightness. This is the most brightness, number 1. This is the second most brightness, number 2, etc., etc. But then, once we realized that we're not the center of the universe and there's other things around, and that brightness depends on how close you are, we needed a new scale of brightness. But people didn't want to redo everything, so they started doing negative brightness.
Luminescence, there's albedo. Yeah, exactly.
So it's called magnitude scale, and it actually works logarithmically. But there's negative brightness, and that is much brighter than like a 1 brightness. And it's very confusing, but it's sort of like how we set this scale for the puzzles, right? This is a 1, this is a 2, this is a 3, this is a 4. But now we realize that there's more than this. There are more uncharted territories, and we need to adjust our scale. We need to add not negative, but more, right?
Riff Clown, that it's probably actually not going to be the average. It's probably going to be, and I always get these terms messed up. Is that the median or the mean? The average is probably always going to be like 3.5. Like, not because we don't want to push the boundaries, but just because, if I'm being completely honest, the vast majority of people aren't us. There's only 18 people watching. We're not the vast majority of people making puzzles. The vast majority of people making puzzles make 2, 3s, and 4s because that's what they can make. I'm not even trying to gatekeep intelligence. I'm not trying to be a complete D-bag here. But I don't think there's armies of people that can make 7-star puzzles. Honestly, I don't.
No.
Yeah, so I think the average is maybe would shift to 4 as opposed to 3, but I don't think it'd ever be today's 5. I just don't. And the next point, and probably last point, because I really don't want to hog this, and there's a reason I'm talking quickly. Also, I'm just a nervous, jittery, autistic guy.
It's okay.
But let's talk about Dark Souls. And just like rhythm games, you don't need to know anything about it, and I'll still make it make sense to this conversation. So, Dark Souls is a game that originally kind of didn't understand its niche with Demon Souls, and almost didn't even get shipped because the publishers were like, this game is like unnecessarily punishing and hard. Nobody is going to like this game.
Right.
So then they released it to America, and as we all probably have heard, it got huge cult success, now to the point that the nearest FromSoft game, Elden Ring, has sold over 13 million copies. So there is a huge market for this. FromSoft games are very hard. They're punishingly hard, and one of the entire points that this newest one has sold so much is because you get to say to people, I beat this hitless. And I'm not saying that they're bad games. I actually like them. But there is a prestige.
Right.
And I think that prestige drives difficulty creep either in games or in puzzles. And there's the connection. I think that there is a prestige that brag rights, if I'm being completely honest. And I don't even think that that's some bad thing, that we all should be some perfectly humble saints. But you just be honest with yourself. One of the reasons that people go and solve 5s, 6s, 7s is to see if they can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
and that's okay.
before I got friends in the puzzling community, that's basically why I would try any puzzle, just to see if I could do it. But now that I have like friends in the puzzling community, they ask me, "Can you please solve my puzzle? It's 5 stars." I'm like, "Don't screw me over."
Yeah.
And then they're not my friend anymore, and I don't have to deal with that. So.
Well, that's a different topic. It's literally not a difficulty creep topic, but I actually sometimes think because we all generally either know each other or at minimum have heard each other,
Yeah.
we're actually scared to give negative opinions. We might think them, we might even anonymously rate a puzzle lower, but we're kind of scared to publicly actually say, this puzzle was crap, here's why. And I kind of get it. We're all in the same discords. We kind of do know each other, and we don't want to be mean. We're socially awkward, nice kids. So
But
we
it's
don't want to
almost
do that.
we almost
And
need to normalize that, which is kind of rude. But
yeah, I think we need to be a bit better at that, if I'm being honest. That's about all the points I had. Was I wanted to talk about that there is some objectivity, that the reason that difficulty creep in puzzles is more difficult than games, generally speaking, the prestige factor.
right.
The one last thing, this is actually something Riff Clown said in chat like 45 minutes ago. He was saying that the same puzzle could be made by 2 authors and get 2 different difficulty ratings. This is hard to prove, but I generally think this could have some truth to it.
Absolutely.
Almost all my puzzles are rated 4, and if they're not rated 4, they're rated 3. And you can just say, well, I make 3.5 puzzles. And maybe I do. But it's really hard for me to look at Milio Batoide and then look at Revenge of Triad and say that they're 1 difficulty apart. No. I'm sorry, no. One of those, calling it a 3 is like being generous to it. And the other, the fact that it got rated a 4 is freaking mind-boggling to me. Because Myriad of Triad, the easier puzzle, was rated a 5. I made a sequel puzzle designed to be harder, and it was rated 1 lower. Because it was a year later.
That's really weird.
Yeah.
Difficulty
that, to
creep
me, is one of the best examples. Difficulty creep. Yeah.
All right.
But I do think part of it is because I'm a 4 guy now.
Right.
Thank you very much for even letting me have 10 minutes.
No worries. I was very interested in what you had to say. All right. So we will do the group discussion now.
Puzzle fame, even real fame. Like Z-list celebrities.
If difficulty creep is a bad thing, what do you think the one thing as a community of setters could be done to reduce it?
I don't even know if it's necessarily a bad thing, but I think the rate at which it's going right now is a little extreme. I think that there's going to be difficulty creep in almost any field. Things will get harder. I mean, even in like rhythm games, people get better and better at them, and people produce harder charts. It's just kind of a part of doing something enough. You get good, or you get better at it. But I do think that it's problematic in this community right now. I don't know how. I mean, I don't know. I'll let someone else
I think
address the second
if
half of
we
that.
better inform people about what is sort of an acceptable or enjoyable deduction, then it will just get better.
This
Yeah,
is
that
easier
also
said
the
than
approach. Yeah. It is easier said than done, but like even I think like people have to be honest about their feedback, especially on LMD or on other platforms where other people see these puzzles being published and talked about. I think would be the one thing that would be doable and that would have an impact on the project.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you think how public the feedback is a factor in how honest or constructive the feedback is?
Not for me.
Definitely.
absolutely. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Not for
yes.
me personally, but I'm sure it is on a general level.
what could be
If
done
someone
to
wants my
introduce?
feedback in public, and it's really, for me, it just depends how well I know them. How well, I mean, if someone, most people when they're looking for test solves, at least in my experience, it's kind of like most people. I do understand that most people, they want honest feedback, but that people want to just be told the puzzle's fine, and it's kind of like it's much harder to fix a puzzle if it's bad in some cases than it is to just publish it.
Yeah, when I've got in contact via direct message with someone who's just left a tick on a puzzle in the testing channel, I've never had a bad reaction or had someone say, "How dare you contact me to ask for more detailed feedback?"
The only DM I have not liked was when someone said there is no logical path to this puzzle, to which I usually just show the deduction. Every other one, and that's rare by the way, I think it's happened to me 3 times in 2 years. Every other one, please DM me. And to that point, yeah, maybe all of us should just grow thicker skin and be able to take criticism in public. But in the meantime, if that's not an option, I don't think that private solves are such a bad idea. I really don't.
Or
Private
maybe not
tests,
private
someone
solves, but
else.
getting in the habit of letting people who are putting puzzles on the test channel let them know it's okay to ask for more feedback, and then they can get the more detailed feedback in private when the person giving the feedback is reassured the person actually wants it.
I
Someone
think
DM'd you saying there was no logical path for a puzzle?
3 times, actually. Admittedly, these were my
The
harder
same
puzzles,
person?
but yeah.
I mean, if they were to say it for genome, I think that would be understandable. But anyways, what I want to say is like these things that you guys are saying for Discord is completely fine. And on the LMD side of things, I think one thing that people should do more often is even if they do not want to publicly downvote something or like do not want to publicly denounce the person for setting a bad puzzle, there is this feature called hidden comments. And the hidden comments can only be read by the setter and the people who have solved the puzzle already. So if, in my opinion, like there's a deduction in the puzzle that you do not that you do not like or is too hard for the puzzle, just leave a hidden comment and say like this part I absolutely disliked, like just letting you know, and be constructive about it if you can. I think it is also something that should be done a lot more, in my opinion, because the hidden comments that I see in LMD are very rare that are actually helpful hidden comments. Like most of the time, it is about people asking what the solution path is after a thing, but I do not see hidden comments that are left after the puzzle has been solved that are about honest feedback. And I think people should be done more.
Yeah, and what
I didn't even know hidden comments were an option. I will have to look
Yeah,
for
you can
that
tick
setting.
it on the right side, just below where you write it in. You can tick hidden comment.
And what Daniel Silverstone has just written in the chat is phrased very well. I'm wondering if an FAQ on the testing channel on how to give feedback about puzzles would be a useful thing.
I think also there's something to be said for how to receive feedback.
Absolutely.
Some people you can criticize. You can be like, man, that step was insane. I hated that, and they'll be like, oh well, that's exactly how I intended it. Or I mean, like I don't know. You get that kind of stuff too, even if you're honest with them.
You more often get, oh no, there is a logical path. You just didn't find it. But as we've talked about, if you can't find it, then it's still not good.
Yeah, telegraphing is big and hard.
I definitely agree. I mean, I think, and that's kind of why it's hard for me, at least, to give negative feedback, because I'm not gonna engage in an argument with someone about why I didn't like their puzzle either. So typically, if I don't know the person who solved it, I either will if I enjoy it, give positive feedback, or just say nothing. Kind of. But
Kodak once. Oh, my bad.
go. You're fine.
It's sometimes hard because of latency. Kodak once said something a while ago, and Niverio actually touched on this as well, about how we kind of have fans, if you will, people that somewhat consistently solve our puzzles. And that is an issue in of itself when it comes to this, because generally speaking, if people keep solving your puzzles, they tend to like your puzzles. If they like your puzzles, in some ways, even though I like it, don't get me wrong, maybe they're not actually the most objective when rating your puzzles. They already like your puzzles. So, and then you get into a feedback loop.
It's been brought up in chat. On LMD, there is also a tendency to rate the setter rather than the puzzle.
Oh yeah, definitely. But
Honestly, I don't think
you
that
do
is
a
that
puzzle
big.
even if you cannot find a really hard step. If it's from a setter that you you regard very highly, you'll just be like, oh, I know that step sucked for me, but I just know that there was something better than that I just couldn't see, and so then you rate it high anyways. Like that definitely happened.
I think personally though, like that point about like people rate the setter more than the puzzle is not entirely true for most cases, because there's actually an example I had of this that I actually followed this through for a few puzzles now. And the example I have is Fist on a Fell. And like Fist on a Fell is probably the most known setter from CTC community, and on LMD his puzzles get solved a lot. But I actually have recognized that his latest puzzles that most of them use global constraints are actually not rated that highly. So I actually don't think that is the biggest problem here. Like people are still rate relatively
4 in a row
objective,
now,
even if
right?
it's a piston fell puzzle.
4 global constraints in a row.
Yeah, pretty much. And none of them are really extremely highly rated.
Yeah. Well, I think some of those are also, to be totally blunt, I guess, because some of them are also just, like Scorp, for example. I mean, Scorp can rate them. Other people who you can just pull up a solver and solve some of them. That is inherently going to almost, I mean, my experience is that almost always hurts the puzzle's rating, just inherently. The ability for a solver to solve the puzzle, you're going to get.
If I may, most of my puzzles have very simple rule sets with very few exceptions. And while it is nowhere near as high as some people, I have fairly highly rated puzzles. So my existence could be an argument against that.
Well, I don't think so. I think that you're a very good setter, and there are puzzles with vanilla rule sets that are rated very highly, but they're typically not the ones that are being rated like 100% over and over and over again, like chaos constructions are, for example. That's been my experience. I mean, we just recently, like last week, I think Niverio was searching different variants that have how many 100% for different variants, and like chaos construction was like 30 something. Renban was like 5.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's kind of silly.
I like Renban. Too bad.
I do too.
Yeah. Yeah.
To bring back into a focus where everyone can sort of discuss this, because I did say that I would bring this up during this part. Riftman asked a while ago, compare brutal opening followed by gas solve with a puzzle with a mid solve sort of bump in difficulty. What's worse in terms of difficulty?
Well, I have opinions on beauty with that, but that is literally my very subjective opinion that I will try to not have influenced my concept on difficulty. When it comes to difficulty, if you can't get past a section, you can't get past a section. Therefore, if a puzzle is mostly pretty easy, but something requires, I don't know, an exocet, it's still a hard puzzle. I'm not just pulling that randomly. Voltari by Shy is an easy puzzle other than the Exocet. Therefore, it's a hard puzzle.
I agree.
Absolutely.
I think that the hardest step is pretty much gonna, and I mean, I think that if I'm going into a puzzle, I mean, it really depends how it's being presented to me. If it's like, oh, this is a 3 out of 5 puzzle, you know, like on LMB, it just says it's 3 out of 5, and I try it, and there's a step that I cannot see how to progress. I mean, for me, like I've already addressed, I'll probably stop. I'll probably just stop. Either way, if it's the beginning or the middle, I'll probably just be like, well, this isn't the puzzle for me. I am not understanding it.
I think for me, a bump in the middle, it depends on the first half. If the first half is preparing and building up the logic and signposting and teaching the person how to do then the type of logic which is being dialed up to 11 in the bump, that's fine. If the bump just comes out of nowhere and it's an entirely different sort of reasoning, that's different.
That's a good point, actually. It's a really good point.
I do prefer the harder spot to be later, but I think that's almost more of a beauty comment, but I could be wrong.
I think it does just depend on the context. I think if there's a speed bump in the middle, then it depends on, like Pallando is saying, if there's a lead up to it, you know, logically, if you can like extend previously used logic to that step, you know, maybe it's harder than the previous steps, but you know, it's somewhat at least corollary to it.
Yeah, I think
a little more digestible.
Yeah, I think it depends. I think it depends more on like what the step actually is, and like how it's communicated, rather than whether it's at the start of the puzzle or midway through it.
I agree.
Yeah.
Personally, like mine is a little bit more convoluted on this. In my opinion, I personally am more tolerating towards having a hard break-in, which is the hardest step of the puzzle. And that is mainly because I find it like in the sense that if the puzzle is presenting a concept that is a relatively new idea that the setter has found, and it is a genuinely hard deduction to make, and that is the breaking of the puzzle. And in that sense, I am usually more tolerating to spending more time on it. Like, if I am spending 35 minutes on a break-in, and it's actually a rewarding and it's something that is elegant, I will be okay with it. But normally, if I'm spending 35 minutes on the middle step, I will be more irritated than normal. In many cases. There are exceptions, of course.
So you tie that in with the horizontal difficulty against the vertical difficulty.
Yeah, relatively. Like, I will be more tolerating towards a horizontal difficulty, especially since if I'm solving a very hard puzzle that is advertised as such, I expect it to have at least some kind of horizontal logic into it that is relatively new and is not just a very hard thing geared up to 11 just for the sake of it. So that's my take on overall.
Next prompt. Sorry.
Test casing. Test casing instantly makes a puzzle not fun to me. Like,
Okay, can we define test casing? I don't want to be. I'm kind of serious because
if you can't track it mentally,
Can we?
and I know that is subjective. That of course is subjective. But if you can't track it, sorry.
I was muted for the stream while I said that. There's a lot of background noise right now. My cat is going insane, but I didn't say that for the stream. So I'm going to say that for the stream. What makes a puzzle difficult and fun versus difficult and unfun? Sorry, guys.
We heard you.
Well, test casing and Tyrgannus. Q Tyrgannus.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm here.
Oh.
Hello?
Yeah, I was just going to mimic the conversation before, but no, I mean, so like, I think test casing is definitely subjective, and definitely, like, there are if you're very familiar with a certain constraint or a certain kind of logic, then you may not need to you may find something that someone else might call just testing cases. You may just kind of see it just like that, and that's going to just be dependent on the audience. I think that's partially where you have to communicate. If there's a specific audience you're wanting the puzzle to be directed towards, that should be communicated as well.
Do you think colouring is a subset of test casing?
I never use coloring that way. I use it as cell mapping, but some people could.
I mean, again, I think that really just depends. I think it just depends on. I personally would not say that. I think you couldn't call it test casing any more than just like pencil marking is test casing. I think that if you're, it depends on the kind of coloring you're doing. If you're coloring regions or shapes or something and just testing different possible shapes, then yeah, I mean, you can make an argument that that's test casing. But I don't think coloring is inherently like test casing, really.
I guess what I've always found interesting about test casing or case checking, I've heard the same thing, is that I think that this comes up the most in the literal most popular variant of all Sudoku, and that's Killer. And yet, Killer is the most popular variant in Sudoku. So, on some level, people are fine with it. And if you say there's no case checking in Killer, there's certainly killers without it, but there's a lot of killers with it.
Well, it's weird because I don't feel like it's case checking. It's like considering the options,
It's the same thing, though.
Well,
I don't. I mean, I don't like. I don't. I mean, I'll be honest. I'm not a huge fan of pure killers for that exact reason. I mean, I'm certainly not the majority, though. As has been addressed, I'm not the majority, and I think that killers are really popular, and they do kind of involve exactly what you're describing to some extent.
Like personally, I want to say this about when it comes to case checking. Case checking is not something that people can really generalize too well, in my opinion, because in my eyes, when I think about what case checking is, I think about a few different factors. The first factor is, like, if the intended path has something that might have case checking, first of all, is the location of the case check an intuitive position of the grid? Like, is the solver going to check this place if he is stuck to find deductions here? Second of all, how long will it take for the solver to get the contradiction to ensure that the case checking actually brings the deduction in? And this depends from puzzle to puzzle and how difficult they are. And personally, like, it is an intuitive thing and it's an emotional thing. It is at just one point when you are checking cases, you just start to feel unfun. And I don't think that is something that you can objectively define as like 3 steps and beyond are a no-go. It is very subjective. But I think it's about when your mood for the puzzle changes. That is the bad point, and that is something that is not objectively definable in my eyes.
Oh no, there's nothing objective. Same with bifurcation. I mean, even like almost like a naughty word in the puzzling community, but like, I mean, for one person, tracking down the consequences of some possibility might feel exactly like just like you're literally just bifurcating, where someone else it may just feel totally natural. Definitely solver to solver.
You okay there, Pallando?
Yeah, we can hear your typewriter in the background, Pallando.
Yes, I was just typing a reference to a puzzle, and it's probably easy to get the spelling on the chat line.
No worries. Do we need another prompt?
I actually have to go, unfortunately.
No worries, no.
Yes.
All right, bye. Thanks for having me on.
I know.
Good having you.
Thanks for being here. There's a comment. It's said in almost every Send video. Heck, I think I said it, and Niverio said it today. And that is, and KNT said it in chat. It's a really commonly said thing, and that is, if you want to set hard puzzles, solve hard puzzles. Okay, so I'd actually like to amend my statement that I made a year and a half ago in my setting video and say that is unintentionally, accidentally, slightly gatekeepy. It can be amended to, if you want to set hard puzzles, study hard puzzles. And if you think that's different, if you watch live solves of hard puzzles, you're gonna learn. It may not be as good as solving, but if you can't solve them yet, you can watch people solve them and you will get closer to be able to solve them yourself. So study them is probably a better word.
That's a good I cannot even distinction to make. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Ambrose makes a good point about the puzzle attempted checkbox. I personally am also hesitant to check that box because my understanding is that it then removes it from the queue of people who might actually be able to finish it.
I don't think so.
Like
it's only when it's
or is it only when it's solved?
It's only when it's solved.
Well, then I will start. I will start marking that box then.
At least that's what my understanding was.
ASMR typing stream when.
I mean, Tyg, you just said such a factually correct thing. I just couldn't think of anything to add except saying like I agree. Because like personally, one of the reasons I am really keen to solve hard puzzles is also because I want to be inspired by new ideas. Like that's what I said. Like in order to set hard puzzles, solve hard puzzles. Like because thankfully I am experienced enough to tackle 99% of the puzzles out there. But what you said is true for overall an average solver who might not be on that level yet. So I am glad that you made that distinction that watching people solve hard puzzles can also lead to such similar moments.
Yeah, and specifically the reason I came to that conclusion, and I only actually came to this conclusion recently, is like I said in my setting video, I said the same thing. And that is, I was thinking, what made me make a huge jump from solving? Because for years I was doing newspaper Sudoku, and newspaper Sudoku is ones and twos. I'm not even trying to, say there's anything wrong with that, but it's ones and twos. And then I watched Cracking the Cryptic, and I could solve better. And like, what really inspired that? And if I'm being honest, it was Cracking the Cryptic, a movie by Ahaupt. Watching that video, like in 1 hour, made me a at least 3-star solver because I started thinking in ways I'd never thought of before.
It helped is a very good setup.
Oh yeah.
There seemed to be some difference of opinion earlier about whether difficulty creep is good, bad, or just inevitable.
Well, I think it is inevitable, but that doesn't negate it being good or bad. I do think it is inevitable.
I think there is some aspects which are bad about it, mainly deductions that are not pleasant occurring more often. But I don't know if there's anything remotely good about it. Like I can't think of a thing that's good about it.
Well, I think it develops the community, right? Like, I mean, it's like you're pushing the community forward. Say if we all sat around setting, let's say the whole community for the last 2 or 3 years was just setting gas puzzles only, and we never tried to set anything harder than gas ever. I mean, I guess that's not necessarily bad, but I wouldn't necessarily say that's good either. I think there's something to be said for trying to push the envelope a little bit. But
I agree. Mario 64, I'm a gamer, I can't help it, is a very easy game. I'm sorry. And modern Mario games are harder. And I generally think they're better. So there is something to be said about having a wider range of deductions, and by definition that is going to happen, a wider range of deductions, and having our best solvers not get so bored that they leave the community. The biggest issue is the bulk of the difficulty. What I think should almost be a conscious decision for some of us setters is to make easy puzzles as well. Not make easy puzzles, not make hard puzzles, but make easy puzzles as well.
Yep, I completely agree. That's what I have been doing whenever I'm setting. Like, if you go onto my LMD, I always have like 4 or 5 puzzles next to each other, 4 or 5 stars, and I'm like, wait, this is too much. I'm going to set a 1 or 2 star. I think that is also a pretty good refresher on your brain to make sure, remember how to make a fun puzzle. Because when you're setting an easy puzzle, like, it is relatively hard to make an easy puzzle interesting, and keeping your setting brain occupied on such a thing occasionally keeps your brain also in check about what you yourself find as fun and what you think the others will find fun.
Yeah, if I'm understanding people correctly, there's fun easy puzzles and easy puzzles which aren't fun. There are fun difficult puzzles and there are difficult puzzles that aren't fun. And the problem isn't the increase in difficulty. The problem is the increase in non-fun puzzles, if there is one. And the solution is awareness of what makes a fun puzzle, a short puzzle fun, and what makes a difficult puzzle fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think and also there's a distinction to be made there, because an easy puzzle that's not fun lasts a couple minutes, right? And I mean, there's just inherently less in like, if you're solving a really hard puzzle that's really not fun, that requires a substantial amount more like mental and emotional investment.
I think something summarized it pretty well recently that I saw on Scott Strosall's channel. He was solving like a hand logic puzzle, and it said it could take anywhere from 20 minutes to infinity. And I was like, oh boy. So if something takes you infinity minutes, or could take you infinity minutes, it's probably not a fun experience, I'm guessing.
It's okay, so tangent, but a hand puzzle. Let's take the Rubik's Cube. I bet a lot of people in our community can solve a Rubik's Cube, but that'll take you anywhere between 5 seconds and your lifetime. Yeah. So it's just those are kind of hard to judge, is I guess what I'm trying to say.
It could also apply to a Sudoku, though.
Well, yeah, definitely.
I wonder if it takes a different skill set to make a fun 5 out of 5 puzzle than it does to make a really fun 1 out of 5 puzzle, because the challenge is different. To make a really fun, really easy puzzle, you're still trying to get interesting deductions in there, and getting those in at the same time as making it really quick and easy is also a skill.
It's a different skill, which is why it's hard to compare them.
But you're right. But you said the consequences of getting it wrong are lower for the shorter puzzle.
For me personally, and like this is incredibly subjective, what I find fun in a 1 or 2 star puzzle is design and flow. Mm-hmm. Does it look cool, and did it flow well? If I can answer yes to both of those, fine. Because I'm frankly not looking for logic I've never seen. It's happened on rare occasion, but I'm not looking for it. I'm kind of looking for it on a 5.
Yep, I think that's a pretty good point what Tarek said. That's like, I often find myself, like, especially when I'm setting, like if I'm setting a 4 or 5, I'm always going to put logic first. If I'm going to set a 1 or 2, I always try to make sure that it looks actually good. And then it also has cool logic next to it. Because it just feels more natural to go for it, because your priorities are very different. And when you are not trying to showcase a specific logic that is not especially cool, then what you want is for as many people as possible to solve it and have a fun time, like spending 10 to 15 minutes. Or maybe longer if they are a relatively newer solver. But like the point is still standing.
I think I somewhat disagree with your perspective in terms of putting logic first in a hard puzzles. I think I put flow first in hard puzzles because the flow is so important in a hard puzzle. like if you break the flow in a hard puzzle, it immediately becomes unfun, at least for me.
That makes sense.
I'm solving
I
a
can
5
see
out of 5, and I can't see what to do, and I still can't see what to do after 30 minutes. The opportunity for me to even have fun, even if I got past that hurdle, is expired for me. I'm no longer even capable of having fun.
I wonder if there is a slight difference in what streamers or just marathon solvers think with difficult puzzles to somebody else. Because I'll be completely honest, I have solved some pretty hard puzzles, but it is not actually common for me to sit down and take 2 hours of my life. What is common for me is to do 30 minutes, get stuck, do something else, and go back to it. But you can't really do that if you're a streamer.
I wish.
Yeah, I even struggle with that. If I step away, usually I don't even come back. But I don't know. I'm a bit odd, I guess, in some respects. I just have a hard time with that. For me, I have a really hard time just like hard. If a puzzle takes me longer than like an hour and a half, I've probably made a mistake. Just because I have ADHD, I make simple little mistakes. If I've been solving for that long, I've made a mistake almost for sure. And then as soon as I find out that I've made a mistake, I just kind of get angry and quit. So I struggle with like long puzzles, no matter how I split it up.
No, I'm unique then, sorry.
Okay, let's talk
I
about
definitely come back to hard puzzles.
what you just said, Niverio. KNT's aquatic construction, 6 out of 5, 3 hours solved, but you enjoyed every minute. I'm gonna be honest, I enjoyed every minute except the last few minutes. Mostly for 2 reasons. 1, because my stamina was out, and 2, because there were some really hard Sudoku spots that I just didn't really care to see. I just wanted chat to tell me because I was like, I've heard this part is the puzzle is hard and like I'm tired from the other part of the solve. But like I feel like ending a puzzle with really hard deductions is much worse than starting a puzzle, or even the middle with really hard deductions, because ending a puzzle with really hard deductions, it just feels really bad for the solver.
I do agree on that. Like, if I really feel somewhat frustrated. Like, if I'm on like last 16 cells of a puzzle and the puzzle is still resisting, I kind of feel annoyed sometimes. Like, not always, but if I do need to like take more than 10 minutes on the final deduction of the puzzle when there are only like 16 cells out there, it feels weird to me usually. Like, I really want a puzzle to have smooth ending in many cases as well.
I'm beginning to realize.
And about that aquatic construction and that final deduction, Canty knows me quite well because I have solved pretty much all of his puzzles live in front of him. Yeah.
Which final deduction? Wait, which puzzle? Sorry.
On the aquatic construction, KNT actually guided me through that ending relatively quickly because he said, like, I know you do not like these type of deductions, so he made it sure that I wasn't just being stuck on that one. Purple, just so you know.
Okay. Go ahead, Tyrgannus.
I'm starting to realize that, before this conversation, just, 3 hours ago, I thought that I had completely separated beauty and difficulty in my head, and I was so good about that. And I'm beginning to realize, just thinking and talking about this, it's harder than I've been lying to myself. This is difficult because there are some satisfying things, like that unwind at the end after the midpoint. I really like that. But that tends to work if the ending isn't that hard. So I recognize that this is completely subjective, but if the ending is really hard for me, I am going to think worse of the puzzle, and that maybe that's not fair.
I completely agree.
No, I agree. I don't like it, but if a puzzle is like, it kind of depends. If there's like, for me, I would much rather have say 23 out of 5 steps at the end to end a puzzle, then a step that I would say is 5 out of, even just one step that I would say is 5 out of 5 right before the puzzle finishes. It's just this is not satisfying for me. Once I get to past a certain point out, I would like it to just kind of tie out nicely.
I mean, I don't know if there's some kind of thing in show business of like don't end your show on like a sad note, because then the viewer just feels shitty. But like that's kind of how puzzles go for me. If it ends in a bad place, and I feel like I didn't spot something that maybe I should have spotted, I just don't like the puzzle as much. I don't know.
The thing is, though, something Nordy said about being a puzzle libertarian and accepting all kinds of puzzles. I really much understand that philosophy. So to an extent, I try to word things, and it makes everything so wishy-washy. I try to word things like I don't like that, or it's subjective, because if a puzzle starts off easy and gets harder and gets harder and gets harder and gets harder, a lot of people might not like that. But if that's exactly what the setter was trying to do, that's kind of a cool achievement.
Yeah, I mean, I will admit I'd set puzzles like that sometimes. I mean, it kind of, I prefer it to be a little bit more spread out, but sometimes especially if it's something kind of novel, I might start with something a little bit simple that gets you thinking about, what's happening, and then it might progressively ramp. It kind of depends on the constraint for me, I suppose. Like if I was solving this like a Renban, and it was just Renban, I might appreciate that a little bit less because I've solved tons of Renbans.
If it's something novel, I really like Clover's idea of starting the puzzle with like confirming that you understand the rules, like having something obvious if you understand the rules, and then just going from there, because I think that's the most important part when you start a puzzle, is to make sure you understand the rules.
That's the ease-in versus
I mean,
break-in that Rocky sometimes talks about.
Mm-hmm.
I like 100%. I took that approach when I was setting that vault construction. Like there are some steps to set it up that I mean, they're pretty direct. You have to get them. Although in that particular instance, it basically instantly spikes to being quite hard. But it does at least force you to like make sure you understand what's going on before the hard part.
Yeah. Mathpesto says that he doesn't like when the puzzle ends in pure Sudoku. It's unsatisfying.
It's so hard to avoid, though. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, almost every puzzle ends
realistically,
in pure Sudoku. Seems like maybe one person. Like there are certain kinds of puzzles. Maybe like 2 to 10th is good at avoiding it because he puts disambiguating clues that are used as late as possible in the puzzle. But like, I don't know, it's like specific kinds of puzzles you can do that in, I feel like.
I think the level Sudoku really matters because technically, and it's a technicality, if the puzzle ends in 50 singles after all of the variant logic is done, that's technically ending in Sudoku, but I don't think a lot of people are going to complain about that. But if it ends in, 2 Y-wings, people often are.
Oh, that's way different.
Oh yeah, no, definitely agree with that.
I don't think that's even pure Sudoku. That's like advanced Sudoku.
There was a version of so when I was setting Renban Rocket, which is just a pure Renban that I think several of you guys have looked at, but
I remember
when I was setting that, there was a version of that that I was just kind of like playing around, and there was a version of it that resolved, and I like looked at the solver, and there was a step. It was described as like an XYZ wing at the end of the puzzle. I was like, oh, I just thought it was funny. I mean, obviously I didn't use that, But yeah, no, that would not be fun at all. Like in a variant Sudoku, you shouldn't have to use an advanced classic technique to finish a puzzle, in my opinion. I think Jovi has pretty strong opinions about that as well.
I don't remember who it was, but at one point I had to argue with someone to remove two Y wings.
It's not a rare opinion, yeah.
And an X wing from the end of their completely variant Sudoku with no other classic techniques at all. And I don't know why I had to argue with this person to do that, because it just seems ridiculous to add that at the end of Sudoku. It's so unsatisfying, I think.
I still remember one of my second puzzle I ever set. I set quadruples with Renbons that circled around the quadruples. This was before I even had Rank's solver installed. I was just using the F-Puzzle native solver, and I found this like break. I got this break in, and then after the break in, there were 4 jellyfishes, 2 starfishes, 2 Y wings, or maybe 4 Y wings. I mean, it was just absolutely absurd. Like it was totally unrelated to the constraints at all. It was just you may as well have just given some digits and it produced these ridiculous techniques. And I had Clover test it. She quit. She didn't like it. I still feel bad about that puzzle because it was so terrible. The one person who did solve it said they had to bifurcate it. So that was quite the learning experience for me, understanding that. I mean, that was my second puzzle ever. So kind of taught me that, well, probably shouldn't just because a technique's there doesn't mean you want it there.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I actually have to go. Something kind of came up. I technically could avoid it, but it's not smart for me to avoid it. I'll leave with the statement of, even though it's nearly impossible, a question one should ask themselves when rating a puzzle is not how hard was this for me, but what logic was in the puzzle. Because even though nothing is perfectly objective, nothing is, you'll get slightly closer that way.
Yeah, I can see that.
I mean, I don't even know if one can answer, honestly, how hard was this for me, like, once you said it.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
no.
Thank you for having me, but I'm going to go.
Thank you, Tyrgannus. Have a good one.
Bye. This was even mentioned, I think Nordy mentioned it, I can't remember who mentioned it for sure. If you've been working on setting a puzzle forever, you kind of lose perspective on its difficulty entirely.
For sure.
I mean, for me, if I'm test solving one of my own puzzles, if it takes longer than 30 minutes, for me personally, that's like a massive red flag, because well, I mean, that's just for me. For me, if I'm taking, I mean, like some of the hardest puzzles I've ever set, I test solve them, I still get them done in about 30 minutes or less. Just because I know what's going on, so like, it's obviously I'm not struggling to solve the puzzle at that point, so it's hard for me to even think about it.
I think if you are struggling to solve the puzzle, to test solve the puzzle, you might want to reevaluate the process by which you set it.
No, I agree, actually. Yeah.
Because you should understand it enough that it should be really easy to solve it.
Yep, completely agree on that.
Even the killer Shikaku, I mean, by the time I was done setting that puzzle, I was probably solving that within like 10 minutes. Like, I mean, it was just bam, bam, bam. I mean, because like all the steps are pretty straightforward. It's just it's very strange logic, you know.
Yeah.
I guess that those two things can mutually coexist. That's how it felt.
Yeah, like in my eyes, like I think this is a relatively different topic to difficulty overall, but like I really think like what people consider as test solve is like people should understand how valuable the thing a real test solve is. Because I don't think some people really understand what a test solve should be. But like in my opinion, like when I test solve a puzzle, like so many things are going through my mind, especially whenever I'm going through the puzzle, because I always ask myself, okay, I put this in. Now I know the next step is going to be this. But before I put that in, I always take a look back, stare at the grid, and think to myself, okay, I have put naive logic into the puzzle in the later clues. Do these clues that I added later influence the earlier solve in any way? Like you should analyze those things. Like you should be keeping track of the logical deductions that you put in and how difficult they are, and if they are still the same at the end of the setting process. And in my opinion, that is the main part of a test solve, that you should be understanding, like when you have the completed product, like when you're at the end, do you still have the same steps that you imagine that the puzzle will have? Because that is something that can really change the flow of the puzzle as well.
True.
So I think this is also a very important part of it.
I think there's also something to be said for the willingness to kind of on the other side of that coin, I guess. I do agree with that. And when I said that I was test solving Killer Shikaku in 10 minutes, it's because I test solved it like 50 or 60 times. I mean, I mean that puzzle was something else, obviously. But I think it's also important to realize that sometimes it's not so bad for a puzzle to have a couple different approaches, you know, to be willing to relinquish control. I mean, if a puzzle has a few different paths that can get you to the same place, that's not inherently a bad thing either.
No.
Even in the vault construction, Niverio, I don't know if did you watch that video?
I skimmed it, like I didn't watch it
So
fully.
the logic that Simon used to prove the stuff with the bottom right, I hadn't even thought about. I actually thought it was cool that there was like a different way to think about it that was there. It's like it made sense. I think whereas some people might get upset that, you know, I've definitely seen setters get like annoyed when you don't follow the path that they intended, and I don't think that that's necessarily the way to think about it.
Like I love the fact that you brought the vault construction video up, because like whenever I saw this difficulty creep, like this discussion, I still giggle around how that puzzle is like the video title of that puzzle is maximum difficulty this, and I'm just laughing to myself because vault construction is not even in the like top 100 or anything
No,
really
no.
close
I
to
mean, I
that
think it
in
was
terms of
probably on
like
the
the most
approachable
difficult.
side for 5 out of 5.
Yeah, definitely.
Really. I mean, I think it was 5 out of 5, but the real problem for Simon was missing. He didn't remove 5 from the one cell. I mean, that was that I was honestly shocked he even solved it without doing that. But he did it. So
Don't tell me the
didn't
solve
like
path. I haven't solved a version of it.
Oh yeah, true. No, he just missed some vault logic that
Okay.
was like staring him in the face.
That seems like Simon. And then he did something ridiculous to
Yes.
do it instead.
Yeah, exactly.
I am so lucky when it comes to that. Like, I have never had Simon bypass any of my intended step or anything. I had Mark have it, but Simon always stayed on the intended path almost all the time. And sometimes he even explained, like, there was an easy Sudoku logic that he missed a 4 that was looking right, but instead he found it in a cool intended logic way. And I was like, okay, you are amazing, Simon. You just made the video even more interesting for other people to watch.
when Simon bypasses another part, but he ignores what he got from that part. So then he actually does the intended logic, even though he bypassed it. That's very Simon.
Yep. Now, I don't know if Simon's ever just totally skipped over any intended logic I had, really. He just sometimes will think about it a little differently, like frame it differently.
Yeah, same. He always wants to use the fistful ring in my puzzles for some reason, and stop. It's easier than that.
It's honestly grown to dislike set so much. It honestly kind of annoys me when, like, if someone's solving my puzzle, I honestly get slightly tilted just from someone asking me if it uses set. Like, it's like, no, I did not put set in the puzzle. I don't know. That's just totally just me being
But
biased and maybe a bit of an asshole, but
many things tilt you, so it's okay.
that's true. That's true.
Like, I just cannot, like, I tried to do a set puzzle before. I failed. In the sense that, like, I put some sets in the grid, but my own brain, like, none of the sets that I put into the grid passed my own test of, like, do I think this is interesting enough to be
I
a
made
valid
one,
puzzle?
and I think it was the very first puzzle I had Memester solve of mine, and he loved it.
No, I didn't.
No, I'm not saying that set cannot be interesting.
No,
I'm just
he
saying
did
that
not
I
love it.
failed
Yeah,
to
I'm
produce one.
No, I'm
Like,
kidding.
therefore, I have no set
It was
puzzles
a
at all.
cool puzzle, but it was not. I wouldn't make it today.
I basically told Cookie Show that there was no telegraphing that that was supposed to be there, and that no one would ever understand that.
Yeah,
I
as
mean,
people in
it
the
was
chat are saying, seeing a swatch of your own puzzle being solved on Discord or somewhere else is very helpful.
Very, very
That's why I
helpful.
love doing it. Because I personally think, like, if I'm just going to solve on my own, I can just stream it. Like, there's no extra effort on my end, so why not?
I don't know what it is. Nebuzaradan. I'm sorry, I don't know how to say that name. I don't know what it is about set, but I just it's very rarely telegraphed at all. First of all, sometimes even there will be a set. Sometimes it'll be telegraphed almost where it's like it telegraphs the wrong set. Where you need to be
Yeah.
looking at a different set than what the what the puzzle would make you typically look at. I don't know. It's just it's same thing with like anti-night. I feel I have similar feelings. I think it's very hard to set it well.
I'm also just biased against set because I got weirdly flamed in the comment section of the feature of pinch yourself with people saying, this looks like you're supposed to use set, but you're not. Why did you make it look like you're supposed to use set? I literally didn't. I don't look what? I wish.
Internet comments are so random sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, on my latest feature of Handshake, like, Simon featured as a band logic of Sudoku, and, like, I wrote in the comments that, like, the puzzle had no min-max logic. Like, people were in the comments saying, oh, but Simon used green plus orange at least 7 logic in the puzzle. And I'm like, bruh, that's not what min-maxing is, that's like arrow 101. But yeah, like, I do agree with the chat that, like, we definitely need more people that actually stream Souls. Like, there are really just a handful around on the community. Like, thinking about when the Discord server has 28,000 people in it, and I think there are at tops 15 people who stream their Souls ever, which is...
I stream solves pretty rarely. I think I used to do it more. I should do it more again. The problem for me is that if I do it, I mean, I have done this. I've streamed people's puzzles and then decided I didn't like them and quit. I mean, I cannot make myself do a puzzle that I hate. I mean, that with the one exception, and I hated it. I hated it. That was very unpleasant.
Hey, you
The
can do
puzzle.
that too. Like you can just say like I dislike your puzzle in the middle, and then good. That is also a feedback as long as you construct it well and explain why you didn't like it. Like there is no downside to doing it, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, I mean, I won't be rude. I'm just gonna be like, well, I'm not doing this. I'll be like, "No, I don't think this puzzle's for me, and I'll quit. But still, it's just kind of like, I don't know.
I've done that with a lot of puzzles, and I feel like I've been even more rude with it, to be honest, because I usually, if it's a newer setter, or even sometimes when it's an experienced setter, I'll be like, I don't like this. Let me just like look at it for a second enough puzzles and see like, is there anything better? I don't know. I feel like I've been so rude on occasion with that.
In my opinion, like Zeno, like Megalamp, like I don't think that should be a criteria for being streaming. Like look at Jess. Like Jess has popped up in the CTC server like a month ago, I believe, and he's streaming puzzles every day, even though he started on like just 1 and 2 star puzzles, and now he's solving 3 and 4. It takes him a long time. But he is improving very quickly and he's enjoying doing
getting
it.
double hats now.
Yeah.
You know, Jez is great, so.
He hasn't. I don't think he's streamed a single one of my puzzles. Honestly, I'm not producing a lot of puzzles now.
Yeah, by the Ambrose is right. Like it is easy for him, but it might not be for everyone. That is a correct point.
Yeah, I mean, part of the time, part of it for me is that when I'm solving puzzles, a decent amount of the time I'm at work and literally can't stream. So.
Well, that's a good excuse.
Yeah. Yep.
Playmaker, if you don't want to stream a hard CC in front of a bunch of people, you don't have to do that, you know? You can just not do that.
Playmaker's a trooper when it comes to streaming. He'll stream. Well, when he starts streaming something, he finishes it. I think collab solves are fun. I think it'd be cool if people engaged in that kind of thing more often.
Yeah, I think so too. You guys always do it when I'm busy. Like literally every time.
That's true. They are contributing to difficulty creep. But not, I don't know, but I am, they're certainly allow for the solve of harder puzzles.
Oh, collab solves?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that the collaborative solve, I mean, you look at, yeah, I mean, some of the puzzles that have gotten collab solved would probably not have as many solves if it hadn't happened. So, you know. But I don't know if it's necessarily contributing to difficulty creep, because I think that the creep is a result of a much larger community.
I think a lot of people are actually, when they're in a group solving a puzzle and they all agree it's not great, it's like they feel more confident to actually give honest feedback, which is good, not bad. But sometimes it's not actually honest feedback, it's just everyone's memeing and then it becomes a little bit too much. But if we can hold our banter inside, then it could be a good thing. But I think that brings us to 450-ish, 445, 450-ish, and yeah, the group thing could skew the difficulty a bit, but yeah, I think that's sort of the closing of the show, or I guess the discussion. I hope everyone had fun. I think everyone's a little bit tired right now.
This was a good idea and a very poignant topic.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I really did enjoy it, and I'm really glad that you are hosting these kind of discussions because like nobody else is doing stuff like this at the moment. So Like, I'm glad that you are giving people a chance to speak about these things. And this is really, really, really important for the puzzling community because there's literally nobody else doing such things. So
That's literally what I said to Kagisho. I'm like, I want to start streaming only because there's no one else making content about setting. There's no platform to talk about this stuff.
True. Yeah. And also true, Tall Cat. I can always rely on Tall Cat for honest feedback. But yeah. Yeah, this has been fun.
Anyways,
All right, should we just hop off?
yeah, just hop off. Have a good night. Have a good night, everyone in chat. Thanks for coming. Thanks for talking. Niverio, Kagisho, Pallando, zetamath, Tyrgannus, Nordy, and Nell, all thank you for coming and speaking. I think Pallando went to put the kids to bed and hasn't returned, so I'll just kick them from the call. And yeah, thanks for coming out and watching us discuss this. Feel free to like and subscribe. I feel so weird saying that. Every time I say it, I feel weird saying it, but